join internationally acclaimed overland expert Paul Marsh and award-winning journalist Gregory Simpson as they delve into all things responsible overlanding. From choosing the right vehicle, getting yourself prepared, getting your vehicle prepared, safety tips, and much, much more. Only on Responsible Overlanding.
It's actually very interesting because I've spoken to a lot of people over the last couple of months, and I've had good times, some amazing conversations, because people are sitting at home where they are able to connect. They've got more time on their hands, and I'm finding that people are taking stock of what they want to do, where they want to go. There is that frustration. We all want to get out into the bush. We all want to go and explore. I had a lot of people who were supposed to be right now on trips. People who actually had taken good time out, and it's cost them a lot of money. You know, we had a rally that was going to go right around Southern Africa, a mix of classic cars and four-wheel drives. And the cars came out to South Africa, but the participants couldn't. So I think there is that frustration, but I think we've just got to embrace it and not lose sight of hope. You know, I think that the big thing, people can grab onto fear. For me, fear is something that we don't want to stare in the face. It doesn't serve us. It doesn't give us any value. But hope does. You know, the way nature's improving, which is quite interesting to see how it's improving. The time that we're not in nature is giving the time for animals to come back out, to almost reclaim their part without being interrupted. There's nothing worse than going into a game park, and as much as we all want to see the wildlife, there's 10 vehicles around a pride of lines, and as you move out, someone else moves in. You know, I just wouldn't want to feel like that myself. So I do think that nature's taking that breather that it needs, and there's certainly nature's coming closer, and it's coming. People are seeing animals and sightings they probably haven't seen in a long time. The beauty is going to be to get back out into nature with all the people that haven't been traveling. That great time when we can get back out there is going to be pretty unique.
So the first people to get back out there are really going to have the lion's share.
Well, I think they will. I think, you know, nature responds and picks up and heals very quickly, and that's what we've got to realize, that, you know, give it that chance. You think of how little emissions have gone into the atmosphere. Think of what that's done to the earth, to the air, the rain that's falling that's so much cleaner. You know, the animals are absolutely responding in a big way, and I think we're going to see that shift in time to come, and that's great. You know, they can breed more in peace. They're not being harassed as much. There's less of us invading their space, and I think that having that respect for space and being in lockdown, we're having to respect our own space personally in our lives, and how does that look? And being forced to do something is quite daunting, actually. It's quite scary. But once you get into it, actually it's not so bad. You know, we've all had to embrace and make changes and accept that change is going to be a part of our life. And change is not a bad thing. When people are going to go on expedition, it's a big change in their lives. You know, they're taking a norm that they've lived in a very comfortable surrounding, that they've built up a lifestyle that they're very comfortable living with, and suddenly they're making this massive change. They're going to get into a vehicle and they're going to live in this vehicle, which is not too far from being locked down in COVID-19, except you can drive around more. But essentially you're together with one another. And for a lot of couples, I think that was pretty daunting. And I know when clients are planning on big expeditions, that's also a scary point. You know, what will we talk about for a year long? People ask me that, you know. How am I going to get on with this person that I'm married to for 24/7, 7 days a week, on months on end? And that does become a lot easier when you get into it, and you realize that actually the fear vanishes. The ability to cope steps in. And that's what if COVID-19 has taught us a lot, has taught us how we cope with ourselves, how we need to embrace change. It's not perfect. We don't have the answers. But I think people are still very keen to get out and go and travel. I've certainly found a massive amount of people not losing sight of their dreams. In fact, more people are planning their dreams because they've got the time to.
So in some ways, COVID-19 is a perfect preparation for that trip into the wild with your missus for 2 months.
I think, it is. It really is. And I've seen by the number of people that I've connected with around the world that everyone's got their story, everyone's got their challenges. But as I said, don't lose sight of hope. And for those people who have a dream, or who are creating a dream, or finding their dream, that's the hope they're living with. The hope. And part of that hope in my industry has been, we can prepare for this dream. We are going to do it. It's just a matter of when. And I think that's beautiful, because you need to take time to prepare for something like this. And when COVID was forced on all of us with lockdown, we didn't really have time to prepare. It was kind of forced on you, and you dealt with it. And I think if you go overlanding and you have the time to prepare, you embrace it much better. You feel more confident. You can tackle challenges in a much better way. And I think that is very much more important when you're going to be remote and you're going to take time out from what your normal, comfortable day-to-day routine is. You want to be confident.
And wouldn't the desert be the perfect place for social distancing, where the vectors felt?
I think we could all agree that those who were locked down in remote places have got it made. I've got some friends, and they travel a lot, and they're living on a game farm right now. And I think
their probably life hasn't changed that much.
Well, I think they've absolutely missed the connection with people, for sure. What they've really found exciting is that they've managed to see game in a different way. So suddenly they're now forced to stay in one place for 2 months, which they wouldn't normally do. Normally they would be traveling, as a lot of people do. You travel and you move around. Now suddenly you're in one place, one game place, where you actually have access to the game all day if you want to. And now they're noticing habits of animals. So for people who don't take time to go and study the habits of animals, like those who make documentaries and give us the pleasure of watching, we take a brief glimpse in the life of an animal when we come past and we see it for a moment, a minute, and a few hours. And that's all we get of that person or that animal's life. Now you actually take time to really look deeper into what's happening. And of course, they're noticing what happens with the animals, and that becomes even deeper, that they can enjoy it and they can actually learn from it. So it's just showing that if we take time out and we actually immerse ourselves into something properly, we can get good value. And quite often our lives are distracted. They're full of distraction, and we have a measured amount of energy every day that we wake up with, that we have, that belongs to us. And we choose mindfully, or we don't, on how we're going to share that energy and what we're going to do with that energy. And I think the philosophy of what I learn over time and what I continue to experience is how do I want to live my life being the best version of me? And when I'm sharing my time and energy with people, that I'm giving it in the way that I want to share it, with purpose and meaning, and absolutely, I don't want to regret giving the time that I'm not going to get back, because it's too precious to me.
And living in the moment is a key recipe for a good life. How did you learn that? And did some of the sticky situations you've been in bring you closer to living in the moment?
It's an evolution. I think it's something I've learned through absolute experience, hard-learned experience, being forced to deal with certain circumstances where you have to focus your energy. Most of us don't know how to focus. I follow a great inspiration, a guy called Dandapani, and he talks well about focusing your energy. And I think when you focus your energy on something, you get an incredible experience. Now, quite often when people are going to go out in the bush, you take themselves out of their day-to-day life, which is full of distraction. So you've got work, you've got shopping, you've got phones, you've got all the different things that can take your time, your energy, and your focus. Okay? So when you move out of that and you move to a more remote place, like you're going to go in your vehicle into the bush, you're simplifying your life. You're removing a lot of those distractions. So when you remove those distractions, you can be more focused. So when you sit down around a campfire and you're having a conversation with your wife or your partner, you can actually really give them your time and energy, because you haven't got a phone ringing, you haven't got someone drawing your energy. So that in itself gives you a more meaningful experience. And I think, that has certainly over my life has taught me, and I have a wonderful wife who shares so much with me, and how we live our life mindfully. And it's not, nothing's perfect, but we're very mindful on when we started COVID-19 and we sat down between us and we said, what are we going to do during this time that's going to make our time count? How are we going to spend it? We have a choice. We could sit and watch TV all day, sleep in late, but actually we put a good routine in place so we could look back and say we really made good use of this time. And we're doing some studying, we're doing some research, we're filming now like we're filming, but that's because we were able to, now interact. But for before the lockdown, it was really difficult. With level 5, we couldn't interact with anyone. And if you're by yourself, it's much harder. So people traveling by themselves, effectively in the bush, it's a very similar experience. You're going from place to place, but you're still by yourself. So it's an experience. So that's my Scotty. He's just swallowed some water or something.
And in terms of taking the silver lining from the cloud, it's similar to overlanding, where an obstacle comes in your way, you can look at it, you can get negative or you can get busy making a solution.
Choice. Yeah, I like that. I think it's a great analogy. COVID-19, we've had choices to make. And I think being negative takes you down one path. And in the moment when you look at something and you go, I have a choice to make right now. When I get up out of bed in the morning, I have a choice to make. When I come across a situation where I get stuck and bogged down, I can deal with it in a number of ways, and the outcome's going to be reflected in how I choose to deal with it. So you can look at something which is really a bad scenario, and quite often, if you get stuck, it can be. So if you take that approach and you say, well, if I actually look at this approach now, how best can I deal with this? Maybe it's just taking a step back for a few minutes and just deciding how you're going to do it, as opposed to rushing in and making decisions without much thought or planning.
Fear-based decisions.
Fear-based, yeah, you've hit the nail on the head. So, people's biggest fear when they're traveling, some of the biggest fears, because I love to ask this question, say to people, what is your biggest fear? And I want both the husband and the wife to share that with me. And sometimes that's the first time that actually gets voiced, if it's a couple. And you'd be surprised, you have a couple sitting down and we're going to do this trip. But when I look at the wife and I say, what are your fears? And she voices it out, it's almost like, wow, we've actually now put it on the table.
It's therapy.
Well,
on some level.
Yeah, I guess it is. I think it's communication as well. I think what we do is by asking those difficult questions, we're facing our truth. Okay, and I think for me that is very important. If you're going to start out on any journey, be it an overland trip, be it living with someone, you need to ask those honest questions and face your truths properly, because if you don't, that foundation that you put down, okay, so let's take a couple who are going to go on an expedition, overland trip, and they're talking about all the good things they can do. That's great. So what haven't they discussed? They probably haven't discussed the what if something goes wrong. They probably also haven't discussed their fears, their concerns, and those, when those get put on the table and talked about, you now building that foundation of strength. So now that doesn't become an issue. It's not a distraction, it's not a concern. If we are going down the road of building a vehicle, churning in the back of my mind isn't this concern I've got because we've spoken about it. So actually my focus now comes properly. I'm now focused. So if it's a couple and they're not on the same page, it's really important. For me, it's critical. So I always say to people, if we're going to work, we're a team. It's the two of you, and if it's your children, it's your children and it's me. And then it's the people who actually make and build the vehicles, and we become one big team. And together as the team, we've got to really look at see how do we actually all get ourselves onto the same page so we can move forward. It's like a river. You imagine you see this river coming down a mountain, there's all these little tributaries coming down, and as it sort of flows into a funnel basically, and then you get this beautiful energy of a stream passing by, and you look at it and you think, wow, that river looks stunning. But it started out as lots of little tributaries. And very much the same way, when you culminate an overland expedition and an idea, all these little rivulets of thoughts and processes come together, and the idea is you want to funnel them down so that they can become a powerful energy. And Jo has a great adage that she says, where energy flows, energy goes, and And it's so important if you put your energy out there in something. I've spoken about this before, and finding your dream is only one part of it. Realizing it is everything. How do I realize it? I focus my energy and time. Now, we're not taught to do that.
You seem to have a very philosophical approach to life and overlanding. It's a beautiful thing to listen to.
Thank you. It's actually, I guess it's part of what resonates inside me. So, overlanding, and I say that to people when they come with their dream. A dream is part of the story. Okay, it's part of what we're going to do in a process-driven system that we're going to put together. So from the concept of you thinking about your dream to you making the decision that you're actually this is going to happen, you're going to make it. And that's the hardest decision. When you look at someone and you say, well, we are going to drive through Africa. You've crossed the most difficult hurdle. And once you put it out there, you've actually made a public statement to people. And so you've made a more bigger commitment to yourself. It's not resonating in your head. It's now a commitment. So how do you drive that? And that's where often the next hurdle comes. And then you look for someone to assist you and guide you, and and I think that's so important when you look at that dream and how you move through. And the philosophy behind it all is, for me, it gives it depth. If I'm looking at it, overlanding is a massively big topic, and there's so many facets to it. And people take different avenues and they highlight it, and it's beautiful. We learn a lot. For me, I like the philosophical side of it, because I think that as a human, it gives me an ability to connect more with me through nature. And if it's a couple, it often gives us that ability to connect together. And how beautiful is that, when people come to connect together and they can move out. And if they're using an overland trip as the vehicle, excuse the pun, to actually do that, it's actually very powerful. Because a lot of my clients who've approached me they're either retired, and at the end of your sort of working life, for many people, you've driven a career, your wife's had a career, and now you've really got to cement back the two of you to walk alongside one another, because you're not going to have that distraction of your careers. You've retired. I don't like the term retirement. I kind of think
Retired, perspired.
yeah, and I think it's such an outdated term, but that's my personal view. I feel that you change energy and direction. Okay, so it's like a river changing a course. And in that point, when people come to me, I really want to sit and say, you know what a beautiful opportunity you have, because those are your interests, so they've each got interests. And all we're doing is we're taking a vehicle, we're going to take the platform of traveling overland and give you a great opportunity to go and explore beautiful parts of the world. And if your interest is photography and your wife's is painting, well, they can both happen. It's just how you choose to put that foundation in place so you make that reality happen.
Is that one of the best parts of your job, where you can see the marriage is being fortified?
People don't always, I would say, take time to look back, to step back. It's often we're driving in the moment to make things happen. We want to see progress. We want to see things day by day we're achieving. And for me, it's about the relationship that people have with themselves together. And then, of course, they take away and they go and explore in nature. And simplicity is every single thing important. Because if you have a simple vehicle that you've built up, you take away a lot of complexities, a lot of concerns, a lot of worries. Do you need the complexities? Nice to have. It's like, you can have a home which is electronically controlled, a smart house, as they call it. And nothing wrong with that. It's great. It adds a complexity. Do you need it? No, you don't need it. It's nice to have.
God gave you feet to go and put the light switch on.
Yeah, but exactly that. So it's a question of simplifying, and when you simplify your life, and I use the same process when we're building vehicles and I'm advising people. You take away the distractions, you take away the complexities. So you get to focus on what's really important. So when I'm driving in the bush, I actually don't really want to start worrying about my vehicle. I want to know it's going to get me there, and I'll maintain it and I'll check it over, and that's for sure. But the less worry I have, I want to take in the beautiful scenery, and I want to drive down that road knowing I'm not going to have a problem. I'm confident in my knowledge, my experience, and together we have built the strength and being able to do things together so we can confidently share the roles and responsibilities.
That's where the Toyota brand and other Japanese brands come in, but you can give you that peace of mind motoring.
You know, it's not take away what other vehicle brands out there can do. I think it's like anything, you know, everything can work. You know, if you're saying to me, which is the best vehicle, you know, will this vehicle work? And I'll say, well, you can make any vehicle work. You can drive across the desert in an old banged out car if you really want to. There's going to be compromises, there's going to be problems, there's going to be challenges. What level are you looking to achieve, you know? And so some of it's born out of brand awareness, where people have been well marketed to, and that's all they know because that's the information they've had given to them. So, you know, that brand sticks in their mind. If you can open your mind up and say, well, actually, let's just take the brands out of it now. What are my priorities when I'm going to go overlanding? Okay. For me, my values are very simple and clear. It's got to be simple. It's got to be safe. It's got to be reliable. So those are three key basic values that I always say to people. Let's go back to the values. Okay. Because if we endorse the values, it's going to help us choose what we want. Now, in some parts of the world, you maybe don't get the most ideal vehicle that you want. And I think when I'm choosing, and that's a whole other topic, but really when you're going down that avenue to choose a vehicle, I think people can often go, you know what, it's not that it can't work like that, it can. So, you know, you're never going to find the most perfect scenario. You buy a home and they'll often say to you, move in and live in it first before you start trying to make all the changes. Because you've redesigned the whole home before you've moved in, and actually some of the stuff's probably okay to live with. So it's that compromise. Well, what are you actually happy to just accept that that'll work? And how much change is actually driven by necessity and how much is driven by a need to fill a gap and a space?
You built the Petrol for driven to extremes. Any reason why you chose that vehicle in particular?
Yeah, it was very clear. Shell don't have an affiliation with Toyota.
Okay.
They do with Land Rover.
So that's the best car you could find that wasn't a Toyota.
I wanted the simplest vehicle that I knew, and actually the Nissans had a more reliable track record, so the choice was Land Rover. At that time, I still don't feel that they would have given us the reliability that I wanted, and I compared it. Would I have taken a Toyota? Yeah, I probably would have chosen Toyota as my first brand, but I loved the Nissans. They were great. They were just solid. It was
what engine were you running in that one?
It's a Y61 body shape, so it's an old body shape, and we imported them from the Middle East, so they were left-hand drive, and they were 4.2 diesel, much like the 1HZ. Yeah,
if you blindfolded, sometimes you could drive a Petrol and think it's a Land Rover.
You know, they were great. We actually, and I drove many thousands of miles across Russia, Siberia, China, Mongolia, Malaysia. So it was an incredible vehicle.
Expedition of a lifetime.
But then I've driven a 110 hardtop down the length of South America, and I love that. You know, so it's, again, I go back to it. You know, we're choosing when we make choices in our lives because we have a set of parameters we work to. And I think if you define those parameters clearly, and so budget comes into it when you're looking at how much is this going to cost me? Can I afford this? It doesn't mean to say because you can't afford it that you should go for that brand. You know, if you can't afford it and that's your realm and you want to go exploring overlanding. I mean, I've had guys I've known who've I've got one client and actually he took a Beetle and they put a rooftop tent on it and they went up into Africa.
Light car?
I mean, it's just, you know, and he's got amazing stories, and trust me, I'm sure he had his challenges, and I was so touched by the story, and it was in the 60s, and said, yeah, he shared with me some of the photographs. So, you know, it is much more about looking at what are your values, and how are you going to actually build them into what you do. And I guess, you know, overlanding is much like when you're living your life in a different lane, let's say, or a different road. So you know, we're in our lifestyle now where we've got everything we need around us. We've got shops, we've got cinemas, we've got everything we need, so we can have pretty much anything we want. When you move into the bush, you've got different things around you. You've got a beautiful viewpoint you can go and look at. So you take on different responsibilities, and I think that's a key thing. It doesn't mean that it's less stressful. That's where people can often make the mistake. And I think we've spoken about this previously, how you can just become programmed to do stuff without thinking about it. And that is dangerous, because you're not focused, you're not thinking about something, and suddenly you arrive somewhere. It's like doing exercise and your mind's somewhere else totally. How good do you feel after that exercise? Because your mind wasn't even engaged. Or when you're eating something, if your wife's prepared a lovely meal for you, or you sat down and you prepared a dinner together, and you can take the time to enjoy it. How much better is that? How much more enjoyable is it? And I think all too often we don't take that time. So perhaps COVID has given us that time where we can actually mindfully think more about how we do things, how we treat people, what do we want out of our lives.
Homeschooling and more people taking the kids on the road. Are you seeing that, especially with COVID?
It's fascinating. My heart goes out to the parents, because I haven't had children and Joe hasn't had children, and I must say, we think that people have taken on and embraced homeschooling. Hats off to you. Because if I think about the respect we owe our teachers that they've taught us. Now, when you grow up in life, your teachers have an impact on your life. Your parents have an impact on your life. Your friends, your parents' friends, So it takes, as my brother-in-law always said to me, he said, Paul, it takes a community to bring up a child. It's not just a person or a parent. It's not easy homeschooling, but there's some amazing opportunities these days with technology. So technology, as much as it can be distracting, technology is actually our friend. It just depends.
If used correctly.
Well, you hit the nail on the head, Greg. You absolutely have, and I think that's where it all goes wrong, when people don't actually use technology correctly. Who's the master of the technology? So our phone is a great example. Okay, so come the end of the day, 5:05, our phones, they go to sleep. We don't actually want to answer them. If it's an emergency, someone can ring. But quite honestly, that's our time out. We want to unplug from that technology. We had it all day. And I found, by being more disciplined, how I manage my phone, my calls, my, all the things that you've got different media platforms, it can suck your energy and it can distract you to such a point that actually, at the end of the day, you look back and you go, well, how did I use my time? But you got so distracted with all the things that actually there was no real focus.
And you don't need an update from Pete Pompey's.
You actually, so all that comes in, all that information feeds in, and we feel we've got to respond to it. I'm guilty of that. Oh, I've got to respond to this. Someone just emailed, I've got to respond.
Especially now, there's so much information flying around.
Yeah. But actually, if you can acknowledge an email to someone and say, thank you for your email, I will get back to you. So I'm trying to be more disciplined about when I do certain things in my week, just to manage my time better. So, and I find that, by taking certain days, I'll just take phone calls. And if I'm having a discovery call with someone and having a chat to them, or it's a consult, or it's training, I try and specify certain days. And of course, the technology has allowed that, and people who are now taking their children on travel trips. And that's been happening for years. But now it's just been made.
The stigma's almost gone now.
I think people have had to just deal with it. So the fear is not so much there anymore. It's like, oh, we can do this. Okay, it doesn't take away the teachers and the value the teachers add, because we still need.
And you see how much work these guys are putting in when you have to do it yourself.
Enormous. So I think any respect to any teacher, that there's a lot behind the scenes for your children.
I mean, they are it's a very important job for the next generation.
Yeah. Any form of teaching, we're teaching, we're sharing our knowledge, we're sharing our passion. But in that environment for young children, young minds that are actually learning and being influenced for growth, it's lovely to think that people are prepared to take that on. And of course, you are working in conjunction with the teachers.
Can we get overlanding as a subject in school?
Yeah, I've often thought about that, actually.
I mean, your skill set would be manna from heaven. Even a kid from the townships that's never been into the bush before.
You know what? Just imagine you can give that experience. And that's what parents do. When they come to me and they're going, I'm going to take my children on a long trip. And I go, fantastic. let's figure out how we're going to do this. And I get calls often from people who want to take their children on long trips. Okay, and so again, you can go down the road of the fear element.
Yeah. What are the neighbors going to think?
Well, what are the neighbors going to think? What's out there? How dangerous is it? But as much as that comes at you, you can actually look for solutions and put things in place and go, we can do this. People do it. And the interesting experience when you come back, that no one loses out. I probably won't be popular with the educational board, but to be honest, the way schooling is happening, where people are having to distance learn. Well, I wouldn't criticize the curriculum, because I don't, it's a long time since I was in school.
It's not our lane.
But I do think that the way things are being packaged for us to learn these days is on very good media. How many times? So how many people are doing courses at home now? They're learning. They're watching to learn from YouTube. They're learning from Udemy. That's
the
giving
University
courses
of
out.
YouTube.
Yeah, it's YouTube is a phenomenal educator, and I think that's just incredible. People are giving their knowledge out. I mean, Jo's done the same. She's spent the last 6 weeks putting together courses, putting together content that she's sharing. And I think it's just beautiful that people are being so generous with their time and putting it out there, because we're all benefiting from it.
Okay, and Mr. Marsh, we've been getting good feedback on the videos. Many comments. Should we
Yes, let's answer some questions, because I think it's lovely to, and thank you all for your comments. It really means a lot for you to connect with us and to share your comments. And when I make the mistake, thank you again for correcting me. It's good to learn, and hey, I value that support, so thank you. Greg, let's go. What do you have to say?
Absolutely, and we'll start off with tons. Question number one, thank you for the opportunity to get involved in this format. He's asking about petrol versus diesel, and also on the 70 series, not many automatics, only really on the 80 series. How do you sort of navigate the auto versus petrol, auto versus manual, and the petrol diesel?
Well, let's tackle petrol versus diesel, because it's a question I get asked often. People go, well, why wouldn't I take a petrol cruiser? And you have to look at, I think traditionally people always said, it's got to be diesel, because you can only get diesel in certain places. When you're in remote places, you get longer, more miles per gallon, if you want to put it, or kilometers per liter. And yeah, that's true. That's all true. And of course, you've got to look and say, well, cost is another big factor too. Over the years, I found that both are exceptionally good vehicles. So if I'm going to take the Land Cruiser, the Toyota sort of petrol versus petrol diesel engines, they're the most familiar to me. I would say that I build a lot of petrol Land Cruisers for clients, because the biggest challenge you're going to have is you're going to need to carry some more fuel with a petrol, because it's going to use more fuel. But equally, if you take a diesel and you load it really heavily and you drive it really hard, you will use a high amount of fuel. They get very thirsty. So, especially if it's not turboed. So, when a turbo diesel gives a better power to weight balance, it can be a little bit more economical, but it does depend how you drive it. So, with every vehicle you look at, I look and say, how are you going to drive it? You can get petrol and diesel in most parts of the world you travel. In very, very, very extreme cold conditions like we had in Siberia, diesel has a tendency to freeze up. So we're using special Arctic diesel. So, petrol would probably have been a bit easier.
Reliability between petrol, because that petrol engine is a real...
Look, the petrol, so, let's look at buying the vehicles. Okay, nowadays, if we look at the 80 series, because that's an older, vehicle, to find a good turbo diesel 80 series is really difficult. They're harder and harder to find, because people have always deemed them to be the best vehicle. And if you go to the one without the turbo, you've got a great vehicle, very reliable, very solid, but also it doesn't have a huge amount of power when you're trying to overtake. The petrol does. So the petrol's got a lovely power that you can just put your foot down and you can overtake. So are we looking at that from a safety point of view? Because if I'm looking at safety, that's a consideration.
Overtaking?
Overtaking is a consideration. Doesn't mean to say you can't do it, but it's more challenging. You're trying to overtake that truck on a long road, and you've got a 4.2 diesel and you're heavily laden.
And turbo, you've
got no turbo, you struggle. So, that's a consideration.
Would you turbocharge the 1HZ?
I have done it. And I have to say to people that you have got to be extremely careful if you do it. So turboing any motor that's not designed to take a turbo is definitely going to compromise reliability. Does it work? Yes, it works, as long as you drive within the parameters of the turbo and you don't overheat the engine. So you're going to put an exhaust gas temperature gauge in so that you can measure the heat going into the engine and you can drive it carefully. So, if someone's prepared to look after the vehicle very carefully, you have to be more careful about it. You absolutely can, and it does work. A low pressure turbo, there's some great kits that are put together. And yes, I've done it successfully. I've got trucks that have run for years, and people have fitted a complete system, an intercooler, a turbo, and EGT gauge, extra temperature gauges, improved the radiator. So if you're going to do it properly. But the most important thing for me is the person driving the vehicle needs to take the responsibility. It's no point going, you turboed my car and actually now it's broken, because if you're not prepared to take the responsibility, you're not a careful driver, and you're not going to, then don't do it.
Cylinder heads are going to be on the way.
You can damage the pistons, you can damage the engine, they cause a lot of damage, and it's expensive. So, the short answer, yes, you can, and you're looking at costs again. More ideally, you'd want to fit a motor that comes out with a turbo. So let's go back to taking a vehicle that doesn't have a turbo, and you're looking at your options and say, I'm trying to discuss whether I buy petrol or whether I buy diesel. So if my options and my budget dictates that I'm going to buy an older vehicle for simplicity and what I want to do, absolutely nothing wrong. Okay, now if we're looking at the older vehicles, the petrol motors were very, very strong motor. Okay, they were absolutely bulletproof. If I have to take the value on what you're going to spend, I'm going to spend more money up front to buy a diesel engine in a vehicle.
More maintenance.
Yes and no. I mean, there's a lot around maintenance. I think it's how specifically do you want to measure it. But if you took all the costs, and I think a lot of people have accurately done this. I certainly haven't, but you can buy a petrol version of the same vehicle for a lot less money. You're going to have to spend money on extra fuel tanks, but is that a hardship?
It depends how far you're going, how long you plan to use the vehicle.
Well, both vehicles will take you everywhere you want to go. The petrol...
Yeah, but there must be a point of diminishing returns. If you're going to use the car for 50,000 Ks, then the diesel's better. But if you're only planning to do a 10,000 K trip, then the petrol's a no-brainer.
I think you'll find the measurement actually, if I read one article, it was very well written, and the guy had taken a brand new vehicle and said, if I'd taken the money, borrowed the money, and did the scenario for 2 vehicles, and actually came out the petrol was more economical at the end too.
So why would you? So, the petrol's a no-brainer, then it's a better engine.
Well, it's
maybe not for off-roading, but on the highway, it's certainly a better engine.
Yeah, I do. I think if I had a choice to drive a petrol vehicle, it's lovely to drive. There's going to be debates on this issue on what's better. It's a very personal topic, and I think without trying to take one side or the other, I would say absolutely both do. Certain countries, your restrictions of using diesel in the cities is a problem.
That was another question we got to. In the UK, the petrols would be more of an easier.
Yeah, well,
sell.
European and EU laws coming into practice now to take an older diesel engine and actually get it to conform to the EU emissions is really expensive. So I've got a friend of mine in Germany, Tom's Fast Technic. Now Tom builds beautiful vehicles.
They have some really trucks.
He's a master craftsman and his business is great. And I know Tom for many years. And so they're finding that the old diesels, the ones we like, the 1HZ, the 1HDTs, they can't actually take a new one and get it through all the emissions. So they're now moving towards supplying their clients petrol vehicles.
Good to get your hands on a couple of those old diesels.
Look, I think any of those are being bought up, kept. But if you're talking a new vehicle, brand new, fine, you've got new engines, new technology. And there's another question about that. But, going back to petrol versus diesel, I think on the older vehicles and even on the newer ones, they can both work. You've always got to look and say, what are the advantages and disadvantages? So let's go back to the sort of 80 series as I spoke, or the 105 series. like Andrew had on the vehicle we built up. That particular vehicle, if I had to take the two and we had to do the work through, if I had to rebuild your diesel engine, it'll cost me a lot of money to do it because it's expensive. You're rebuilding the turbo, the injection pump, the injectors, the engine, the parts are expensive. The petrol one, there are that many around with that many second-hand engines. I could almost just buy another second-hand
You
engine.
drop a new engine in for 10 grand probably.
Well, not quite, but effectively, I can't find you a second-hand diesel engine in good running condition. So if I had a diesel engine here, I'm going to struggle to find you a good second-hand diesel engine that's in really good condition. But I could take your petrol engine, I could probably buy you 5, and it's going to be a lot cheaper. So, at the end of the day, when you're trying to rebuild an older vehicle, they both have their merits, they both have a path forward. And my answer to a lot of my clients now is, why wouldn't you take a petrol? Yeah, we're going to put bigger tanks in, but that solves that problem. You're going to be able to drive it comfortably. In the bush, it's a bit quieter. I always service my vehicles at 5,000 kilometers.
In terms of the fire, sometimes say if you're going through long grass when it's dry, sometimes you get a little bit of a fire hazard with a petrol.
Look, petrol is obviously more flammable. You wouldn't be carrying petrol inside the car, and you shouldn't carry any flammable fuel inside any vehicle.
I mean, the underside with it, like spin effects and stuff.
Yeah, that comes from people who need to check out and understand driving in long grass. So if you're driving any vehicle in long grass, it's not so much that the petrol's suddenly going to cause fire, it's more flammable. So if the car did catch fire, you would have a bigger problem on your hands. And that's why we always say when I'm building vehicles, you have a fire extinguisher within a hand's reach of the driver.
Exactly.
And you have a second one so that you've got more than one fire extinguisher, and then one at the back. So when
your fire starts at the back.
Yeah. So that element of someone worrying about that problem or that concern, simple. When you're going to go into long grass, check your vehicle often. If you're going to stop and you find grass is building up, stop more often because the grass is obviously longer than you expected. And I think and put a grass seed net in front if the grass seeds are knocking off so you don't get those sucked in your radiator. So I think like with anything, petrol versus diesel, I think that both vehicles will absolutely work very well. I think on the newer vehicles, when I'm looking to build vehicles, I go back to simplicity. Okay. So
and your AT, is that a petrol or a diesel?
Mine's diesel, yeah. Yeah, it's the 1HDT.
Sure.
It's a lovely vehicle. Yeah, I do like it. It drives nicely. Is it my vehicle? Actually, no, it's Joe's vehicle.
That's the boss's vehicle.
It's the boss's vehicle. I get to work on it.
But isn't it nice when you've got a wife that's kind of almost like as keen on overlanding as you?
Who drives the car? Yeah, no, it's lovely. I'm very blessed. It's really great. And now let's talk about the topic, automatic versus manual. Now, there's I built both for many clients. Okay, and I think if we go back to the automatic gearbox, I love an automatic gearbox. Just beautiful. It's easy to drive in sand. It's easy to drive in mud. Certain conditions off-roading, you would probably like to have a manual, especially if I'm coming down a steep hill. It's going to give you a little bit more braking, especially the diesels, where you can brake more using the engine. Yeah, you're going slowly down some of the passes, so it's maybe not so critical, but it's much more when you're driving and your vehicle can build up speed and you have to keep going onto the brakes because the engine's not assisting as much. So in an automatic, that's one small disadvantage. Automatic gearboxes are pretty much sealed, although you still need to service them. And I do tell people, change the oil, change the filter in the gearbox. If it's got one, change it. And but if you're going to go through water, and that as long as every like axle and gearbox, they've all got breathers, so those should all be brought up. And water is your enemy, water and mud and anything like that. So whereas an automatic gearbox doesn't have that problem because it's sealed, your mechanical gearbox with a clutch has got a problem because you can get water and mud in the clutch. But how often do you cross rivers? And also, if it's that bad, then take the precaution afterwards, wash everything out, clean it out. So we can debate everything to what's the most perfect vehicle.
What's going to work for you?
With an automatic, I always recommend that people put an extra oil cooler, because I think having an extra oil cooler on the car definitely does improve the cooling of the gearbox. So that's essential, especially when you're loading a vehicle up heavy or you're towing something. Then an automatic gearbox definitely needs an oil cooler. And Toyota do a very good job of putting an oil cooler. And if they haven't got, if they need more cooling, then increase that. So that's important. And then the other thing on the auto box is that you don't have the clutch.
The heaviness of that 79 series clutch.
Well, yeah, clutch is not too bad if it's a standard clutch. If you're putting upgraded clutches in, and if you're used to a car, that's when people jump in.
I had one on test, and by day 5,
the leg was still away.
I had a Mini Cooper on review, and I just went into that rather.
Yeah, cool. The car's much easier.
But I suppose it's different in city driving, using a lot of clutch. If you're out on the road, you're not changing gear that often.
You're not. People have a preference in what they like. They go, "Oh, no, I'd never drive an automatic." But actually, when you drive an automatic on expedition, it's quite nice.
Nice
long
process.
roads to drive. You don't worry about it. The sand's easy to drive
sand.
in. It's more. You can control it nicely. There's less driver input, so you're less likely to get bogged. When you're with a clutch and you're letting the clutch out, you can often be a little bit too aggressive, and the wheels spin, and then you dig yourself down as opposed to going forward. So is it right? There isn't a right and a wrong. They both work. They both have advantages and disadvantages. And I think this is what people actually need to sort of look at when you're trying to make a decision on a vehicle. Okay, you're looking at reliability, you're looking at safety, you're looking at simplicity, you're looking at costs. That's the key thing. Okay, and if something goes wrong, the what if scenario. So if I have a problem with an automatic gearbox, it's going to be more difficult to fix. Okay, if I lose the oil, I've got a big problem. It's
more difficult to be towed. You can't jump start.
You can't jump start. That's a very good point. You can't jump start it. So again, you've got swings and roundabouts. But if I found a really nice 80 series, and I'm using the 80 because I'm passionate, but a vehicle, and it had an automatic gearbox, all right, and I go, you know what, this truck condition is amazing. Would I keep it? Yeah. Look, you can swap. You can swap stuff around. With a specialist who knows what he's doing, you can swap stuff around. It's expensive. So if I found a really good vehicle and it had an automatic gearbox, and for some of my clients I've gone, I found you a great truck. Yes, it's an automatic. Why don't you just try it and see how you like it? And let's teach you how to look after that more carefully. And so, like anything, it can work, and it has its definite pluses.
That's when chatting to somebody like you is essential to debunk some of these.
I think again it's a fear. It's a fear of the unknown. People look and they say, well, I'm going to take an automatic, and I'm really worried about driving this automatic. And that for me is, don't be fearful of it. Understand the advantages and disadvantages, and then you have the power to make a good decision, and you can decide. Like anything, when you choose something, they're going to be your likes, your dislikes, the advantages, the disadvantages. You'll have 80% of what you really want, and 20% you're going to just live with. And is that so bad?
That's life.
And again, you could make it work. So it's, you could pay a lot of money to have the last 20%. And that's often the case. People go, I actually want, and that's okay too. But we're trying to get the balance,
And rather spend that extra 20% on traveling costs when you're actually out there.
I say that to folk too. I do. I actually say, you know what, we can do that, but do you need it? Do you really need that? Do we need to spend that money?
You probably get that all the time. Is this something you really need?
I always say to people, let's discuss what you don't need. Let's look at what you absolutely need, because that way we're going to get a much clearer idea. And look at what you don't need. And if you're taking it, or if you're choosing that route, why? Ask the why. Try and get all that information. It can become, how can I say, too much information. People going down too many sort of avenues to try and make a decision. So simplify it. Okay, and just go back to what I really want. I want a vehicle that's simple. I need it to be reliable. It must be safe. Okay. If it's an automatic, I need to do this to it. If it's a petrol, I need to do this to it. And if it's a manual, I'm going to get these advantages. And if it's an automatic, I'm going to get these advantages. Very simple. And make a balanced decision on sometimes maybe the vehicle standing in front of you is giving you 80% of what you want.
Simplicity seems to sum it all up. I look at your bulls and I can clearly see some of them are very expensive bulls, but you still maintain that simplicity.
It's actually key. I've over the years probably also gone down the route of trying to build vehicles that are too complex, and it doesn't really serve anyone. It's sort of nice to do, and does it end up giving you what you really want? The last thing I want for any of my clients or for myself is to be in the bush with a problem that we can't solve there. So as much as we'll put together a repair kit, a spares kit, a recovery kit, a tool kit, a first aid kit, that's to look after the eventualities you almost hope you don't have to use. Okay, you don't really want to get your recovery gear out. If you can drive around something in an overland vehicle, you're going to do that.
Okay, Luke, the shoulder guy, asked. He's got a 100 series V8 with 200k on the clock. What are some of the strengths and weaknesses of this particular vehicle?
Look, it's that's going to have an independent front suspension. So most of the older vehicles have got a solid axle in the front, and this one's got two arms on either side. So basically independent. The wheels can move independently, and those were prone to some weakness on the lower ball joints, on the actual where the wheels hook on. So you had ball joints at low. So that's always important that you look after those and change them. If it's got 200,000 on the clock, that's probably the time to do some preventative maintenance on the vehicle. And when a vehicle's done a mileage, like say 200,000, and you're going, I'm going to take this vehicle, I'm going to drive on a big trip with it. So if you understand the weaknesses, you can actually sort them out. You can say, what are the weaknesses of this truck? So the lower ball joints we found from experience, they're ones that can and do wear out. Shock absorbers were another problem. And then also the front suspension, on the independent front suspension, would more often than not, if you're driving quite aggressively, you tend to bottom them out more often. So then you could have cracks. I'm saying they do crack. You can have cracks, and that's something to look out for. So again, is it actually set up properly? Are the torsion bars all properly set? If it's done 200,000 kilometers, you might want to change those. And the differentials, just from memory, I think the early ones had a 2-pinion differential, which means 2 little gears, and the later ones had 4 gears, and planetary gears inside the differential in the front, so they were stronger with the 4-gear planetary gear set. So that's something to look out for. Those were one of the small problems.
That's it. You touched on a key point: solid versus independent front suspension. Big talking point.
It's a big talking point. Listen, both will get you 80%, maybe 90% of where you want to go. Okay. So if someone said to me, I'm not going to take 100 series, I say, why not? It's a good truck. Okay. You might have to, if you understand the weak points of that vehicle and you know what to check for, you're just going to check those more often. You're going to drive being more mindful of those weak points. You're not going to want to bottom out the front suspension all the time, because you know that you're putting a lot more strain on the lower wishbones.
So you need good quality suspension.
So good quality shock absorbers, good quality...
Some BP50 ones.
So again, it is about understanding those weak points. And when you understand the weak points, you can drive within the parameters of that, and you can actually do the checks to mitigate any problems that might come up. So nothing wrong with that. Okay, you're going to have less articulation with the independent front suspension. So it's a small difference for some people.
Less articulation of the independent on the front.
Well, you've got the articulation, should I say, but let's assume that if you're going into some ruts, you're going to lose your ground clearance. That's a better way to explain it. It's not so much that, it's more you lose your ground clearance. So yes, that's a better way.
That all these reasons is what makes the 80 series arguably the best of the best.
Well, is it I had a debate with a client yesterday, actually, and we talked about exactly that. We're going to go for the station wagon as opposed to the double cab, okay, a double cab with a canopy on the back. And he wanted to go for the station wagon initially for reasons it's more comfortable, and we added up a lot of reasons. When I understood what he wanted to do with the vehicle, there was no ways that vehicle was going to work. Because for one, he's got 2 children. Secondly, what he wanted to carry with him, including a paramotor, which I would happily take on my trips.
For people that don't understand, what's a paramotor?
Okay, so a paramotor is a great device that you strap an engine on your back and you start it up, and as you run, the wing comes up above you and you fly. Okay, I have a passion for that.
Nice.
And so that said, he wouldn't have had the space, definitely. So by the time we discussed the bigger picture, it narrowed it down to one vehicle that he was going to need to use.
Trailer?
Yeah, we talked about that option as well. A trailer has its place, okay? Again, where he wants to travel quite remote, into Zambian places and quite a lot of wild areas. Try reversing a trailer when you've got elephants coming towards you. It's a little bit difficult.
And
it doesn't mean to say, it doesn't mean to say you can't use it. People do, and let's not take it away. Trailer has its place. It absolutely does. But understand how you're going to use it, where you're going to use it, the time it takes to set up the trailer, the time it takes to pack it away. Understand all those parameters, and then again make your decision based on knowledge and some experience. The worst thing you can do is go and buy a trailer and you've never opened and closed it, and rather go and rent one and try it.
Sit in your garage for 3 years because you figured out you don't need it.
You don't need it. So getting back to that vehicle, I think that the 100 series has got more electronics on it. So I probably steer more away from the 100 series because I do favour the solid live axle in the front. But that's a personal thing.
And the 79, thankfully they're still sold new. Do you normally go buy a new one for your clients or second-hand, or obviously both. A bit of both?
Both, yeah. It depends. It just depends what people want to
spend. And do you have people come to you with obviously different budgets? I mean, should people be scared? I don't want to come speak to Paul because I'm not sure if I can afford it.
It's not about that at all. It's not about that. Sometimes I'll tell someone if their budget is not going to actually build them a vehicle safely. So it's not about saying you've got to have all the money to build the most fancy vehicle, because sometimes I've taken, and that's where the Petrols came into play in a big way, because I was able to buy a Petrol cruiser. There are a lot available on the South African market, the 80, the 105, and I bought quite a few 105s recently, and quite a few Petrols actually.
How's this COVID affecting vehicle sales? Is it easier to get cars cheaper?
I think we're going to see a surge in cars coming on the market, because I think there's a lot of companies who are not going to have the need for the vehicles they've got, be them, different avenues in travel and different avenues in game lodges and places that use these vehicles, and also people who can't afford them. So yes, there is going to be a surge.
So if you've got a bit of cash, this is a good time to make some moves.
Yeah, and a number of my clients have done that, especially those from overseas. They've gone, now's the time to buy a vehicle. The Rand is in their favor, and finding good vehicles. So I'm looking for a good number of vehicles.
So bad Rand is good for Paul Marsh's business.
The Rand is always good value, and that's one of the things I always said when I came back to South Africa. You can build beautiful vehicles in South Africa because it has more of a pivotal point for the world, in a sense. I mean, you do the same in Australia. Trust me, they build incredible vehicles.
But everything must be twice the price.
But it's no, I wouldn't say twice the price. I think labour is certainly more expensive, and so we have an advantage.
That's a big part of the world.
Yeah, it is. But then people improve on how they do stuff. People will design products that they can just bolt in. So whereas here we might fabricate it from scratch, they'll go, no, I'm going to design this on CAD and I'm going to have it.
Don't you just love that fabrication in Aussie?
Yeah, the people, and look, Aussie,
and in
Germany,
South Africa it happens as well.
It does, absolutely. So I think we have an advantage to building vehicles here in this country, purely because we do have a lot of experience. We have a lot of people who are willing to design good products, as we have in Australia, as we have in America and Europe. So around the world globally, we just have a unique setup that people love coming to Africa. So hey, build a vehicle in Africa, fly in, do your training here, test it here, and go into Africa. It's
no brainer.
It's a great attraction. So yeah.
And will you be making trucks until you can't see over the steering wheel?
And I think I'll always be involved in this industry, sharing my passion with people and learning. It's a great. I learn every day from people, from people who send questions in, who ask different angles from the option to go and travel. So yeah, I absolutely do believe that.
Absolutely. And Danny Zero asked, well, what's the reason we don't get the 79 series in the US of A and places in North America?
It's a question I actually can't answer. And to be honest, if I had to look at it, the 79, most of it was developed out of a need. The double cab was developed in South Africa. Initially, there was a company in South Africa, in Johannesburg, Miano's, and they used to cut the single cab and build them into double cabs.
Didn't Andrew have a similar thing?
He might have had years ago. Yeah, exactly. But certainly, they started out, and of course, the double cab was born into the market from Japan and from Toyota. So it definitely has been a vehicle that's synonymous with people in Africa using Toyota. And the Toyota, because the Toyota brand has stood the test of time, there are not too many new models coming out all the time. I mean, the 79 series gets year in, year out, you can buy them. There's small changes, but not massive
Still got
changes.
the same radio.
They've improved. But what I do like about that is that you don't get massive changes. So to answer the question why they're not in America, I actually don't know. I mean, there's definitely going to be on maybe its emissions and some things, but the newer ones definitely, and I can't answer it.
Yeah.
I really can't.
Well, we'll do a bit of digging.
We'll definitely have to ask our American counterparts.
Maybe your friend Scott Brady has got a few.
I need to ask Scott. Scott, I'm sure, will be able to tell me exactly why. So that's great.
Weight and balance are critical to any build. I'm sure you'd agree with that.
Look, weight's everything. You know, I think when you're looking at building a vehicle, you're looking really to take your vehicle and you want to put the weight as low down as possible between the axles. That makes it a lot safer. You're looking to try and make sure you balance it out side to side. So again, when you're looking at what you're taking on the vehicle with you, that's where it's going to come in. So you need to do a mental, calculation of what am I, especially if you're going for something out of the norm. You want to carry a lot more water or a lot more fuel. That all adds up in weight, takes it off your allowable carrying weight. And
people overloading, obviously a dangerous game to play.
People overloading with not actually changing brakes and increasing brake efficiency with more effective braking. Yeah. And also you should be keeping within the general GVM, as they say, of the vehicle, gross vehicle mass allowable. And it's important that when you're looking at equipment to take, you go, well, do I need that? How can I take it? It's very important to get that right.
Less is more, as they say. Barent Lewis asked, is it a good idea to do the 300 ball extension like you get in Aussie?
I think that's going to definitely prove itself over time, how Andrew did it. I mean, they did it beautifully. I mean, it was very well done. It's properly engineered. It's properly jigged. I think the danger comes in when you get someone who just cuts your chassis and lengthens it, and it's not done properly and it's not accurate. That's your problem. What I like to think with the double cabs, the weights at the back, by the time you've got the heavy fuel tank at the back behind the rear axle, then you're putting a heavy steel bumper, then you're putting two wheels on the back. You're putting a lot of weight at the back of the car. And actually, if I could take those wheels and I could put them behind the cab between
Isn't that the best place for your spares?
Well, to me it makes a lot more sense because we all need to carry
two
spares. We've got accessible. It's accessible. If you could, create that space between the cab and then the load body where you could put your two wheels and strap them in there, you've then reduced that weight. And you've reduced the weight of a even heavy bumper that's designed to carry the strength of those wheels. Because remember, that back bumper has had to be designed a lot stronger to carry those wheels sitting like this to keep them in place. So now you can reduce that amount of weight with good jacking points, good recovery points, but it doesn't have to be as heavy.
Make a massive difference in the handling.
It will. That together with when Toyota one day, and I appeal to them to widen that axle to the proper width, is very important in handling. So, the answer is...
A company like Toyota, what's going on there?
It's, I'd love to know, I really would, and I'd love them to answer in why they haven't done it. There's no real sense. Why are we having to put a fix on their vehicle?
Yeah.
It's unnecessary. They've moved all their models to the wider front axle, so just adjust the rear axle and let's do it properly. So come on, Toyota, come to the party.
Come to the party. And if you need some help, Paul's here. Yeah. And Michael says, Paul Marsh, you're a legend. Well, I couldn't agree with that more.
No, that's very kind of you. Thank you, Michael. Appreciate it.
He wants us to make a video about canopy access, but we'll get to that.
I think it's a great video, and I think we'll really do that. We need to do that when we've got a vehicle, so we can talk through that.
Exactly. And Fred asked the question everybody wants to know: would you go into Africa with a new Defender?
I think Fred answered that question for me already.
At the end, he said you already know the answer.
I think so. Again, will the vehicle take you into? Look, any vehicle is going to take you into Africa. My question to you is what are you prepared to put as your boundaries? Okay, so how are you going to go into Africa, and what are your parameters you're working with? Okay, so can you fix it? Can you get spares for it? Is it reliable? And let's just go around that with any vehicle. Okay?
You can't fix it.
Well, that's the challenge you have with any of the more complicated vehicles. And
Yes,
the early Land Rovers, I loved the early Land Rovers, the 300 TDIs and the TD5s.
Is there any car with as much personality as those early Land Rovers?
I don't think so. I've got a client now who we're going to build 2 Land Rover 110s for him and his partner, and he doesn't want a Toyota. He's happy to build 2 Land Rovers because they have a soul and he likes it. So it's personal.
To put a bigger engine in that?
No. You know what? Once you start changing engines, unless it's if you said to me a like for like, if I'm taking the Troopy 1HZ 6-cylinder non-turbo motor and I'm taking that out, and I can change the engine and gearbox into the Troopy, that's doable. That's it's a lovely modification to put a turbo diesel, the 1HDT, with a stronger gearbox in. Fantastic.
The 80 series auto gearbox.
Yeah. Well, I would say you could. I would preferably go with the manual ones. It's I suppose you could do both. I'd need to check. With
and the Parenti 3.9 Isuzu they put in the military spec Defender. Have you got your hands on
the thing
those?
is, I haven't had that. They used to do the international 2.8 conversions as well in the early days.
With the Cummins.
It was the international.
It was strong diesel.
Yeah, it was a lot of money. But again, when you're going away from a brand and you're mixing another engine into a vehicle, how well tested is it? How well tried is it? And if you don't know that is an absolutely good conversion, or the conversion's not done properly. So it's not about not doing a conversion. If someone knows that the conversion they're doing is absolutely bulletproof, they've tested it, they've had many miles of proven happy clients, fantastic. But remember, when you take your Toyota into a workshop to get it serviced and sorted out and fixed up, you've got an engine that's very different.
Servicing, would you take your car to the general dealership or do you find a trusted mechanic?
Okay, so if it's under warranty, you don't have a choice. You're going to take it to the dealership because you've got it under warranty and you want to keep that warranty. It's really valuable. I generally say that if you're going to go on a long expedition, even with a vehicle that is in warranty, I would still say to people, either learn yourself what to check, okay, or when you're going to go to your Toyota dealership, give them a list that you'd like them to check over and above. But generally, if it's an older vehicle, I would always encourage someone to find an enthusiast, someone who actually knows the vehicle, that actually has a lot of in-depth experience, and more so when it's an overland vehicle, because you'll find that if you take your vehicle to a dealership, and they'll check the mileage out and they'll service it according to a factory service sheet, which is not wrong, not at all. But
they're not looking for what you need for overlanding.
Well, point in case, you've added a lot more to this vehicle, so there's a lot more you want checked on your vehicle. So with my clients, I actually prepare a list of what they need to do when they take it to a workshop to have it serviced. So they can actually go to the mechanic and actually go, please, this is what I'd like to go through. Most of it's just checking. And if you're on a trip many miles from home, I like people to check their vehicles every 5,000 kilometers, even if it's a petrol. And no harm in changing oil and checking filters, and especially with the diesels, you change it more frequently. Because at a 5,000 K mark, you pick up a lot more potential problems. You get to see something before it goes on for too long. It might be an oil leak, it might be a crack, it might be something that's just worked loose. So it's a good habit and a good regime to go, I've driven 5,000 kilometers. What are the roads I've driven on? If it's all been tar roads, well, okay, that's fine, And if it's been a lot of hard roads, I'm going to spend a bit more time checking the underbody, the suspension. If it's been through long grass, a lot of long grass, I'm actually want to check that radiator and between the radiator and the air conditioning condenser to make sure that grass hasn't been sucked up between the two, because that often happens. So, that's go back and see what you've driven. If it's mud, you want to get in there and make sure you've cleaned everything, it's properly cleaned. So maybe
you like to empower your clients.
I do, absolutely, because I'm not there to look after the trucks for them. I offer support to them where they can call me.
You're teaching them how to fish.
How to fish. Well, you don't have to be a mechanic. I always say to people, don't be fearful. I'm not going to teach you how to do stuff that you shouldn't be doing. You need to use the services of a good trained technician to work on your car, because, good mechanics absolutely know they've done it 1,000 times. So if you've never fitted a wheel bearing, don't start doing it on an expedition, because you're likely to ask for trouble, and it's a safety critical item. But if you want to have a go at fixing something, then learn the basics of what you need to fix. So adjusting V-belts, changing filters, Even changing the oil and oil filter is not too difficult to do. Topping up axles, topping up gearbox, looking for problems. So I have a checklist that people go through, which is another checklist, and say, this is what you can check. So daily checklist, weekly checklist, monthly checklist, service. Okay. And if you're doing that, you're becoming more familiar with your vehicle. You're getting, don't be scared about climbing under the car. And both, if it's a couple, the man and the woman are both going to be involved, because I've had it on one sometimes where maybe the guy damaged his arm and he can't do it. So it's the wife's job. Or sometimes the guy is actually clueless about mechanical, and actually the lady's the better person and she's much more hands-on.
Do you get clients who come with no mechanical background, and after a while they just get into it, and in a couple of years' time they really know how to work?
I think if they take an interest, for some people it's not their interest, and that's okay. It doesn't have to be, it shouldn't be something you should be fearful of. So if you said to me, I don't want to do overlanding because I'm not a mechanic, okay, and I'm going, okay, you don't need to be a mechanic. You need to be a good checker, okay, because that's what you need to check. So if you can check stuff, you can make a decision. And if you found a problem, you can either go and ask for help, you can take a photograph, you can take a video. I've got one guy I've never met, and he had a problem with his Land Cruiser. He sent me a video, the noise in the engine, So, we've been collaborating backwards and forwards and giving support in that, because he sent me a video with the noise or a photograph of something. So these days, again, technology wins hands down, trying to share very valuable help that you needed. And again, with medical, you can actually, you've got a rash or you've got something, take a photograph of it or whatever, you can get help. You can get it's not as good as a doctor sitting in front of you, but hey, it's better than nothing.
Yeah.
So, and
it could be the difference between stopping your expedition and being able to carry on.
Yeah. So, so having that in place, and I always say to people, so do a good first aid course that you're absolutely hands-on, especially for trauma-related incidents, and carry a good first aid kit and a good medical kit. Okay, so difference. Your first aid being trauma, being based, you're going to have a kit which you can react to and you can sort out, and it's bleeding and it's something, and medical is, tablets and creams and stuff like that. But understand what's in your kit, how to use it, and do that course, because that's knowledge we should all have.
Malaria,
you need to really go and get good advice on, and there's very conflicting reports. I personally, and that's my take on it, I carry a good few malaria treatments when I'm going into areas, and I carry test kits with me, and I'm vigilant about putting stuff on me, So, if people are going, so again, what's your level of risk? Okay, yours and mine are different, okay, and mine and my clients are different. And then that comes on experience, it comes on how I live my life. It doesn't make it right or wrong. Point is, if you assume responsibility for your level of risk, don't turn around and say, well, I got malaria, you should have told me. No, take responsibility for that. The same as taking responsibility for maintenance of your vehicle. The words from
and you'll hear the warning signs come before it breaks, as
you
say.
You do. So, you hear a noise, or you're driving along and you have this almighty crash in the road, or a rock you've hit, or you've gone through a culvert, or something that you've really taken a huge pounding. Stop the car, get out, have a look. Does it all look okay? Does the car feel okay? Are the brakes okay? Nothing leaking?
Look at the tires.
Look at the tires. Check the tires. If you hit the front tire and it hits something, go and look carefully. Check the rim, and monitor it. And then maybe you're driving another 50 k's, and maybe you'll stop and check again and say, did it have a bulge in it? And
so would you say, don't put the music too loud? You've always got to be in tune with what's going on in your...
You know what? It's personal, but I think I very seldom listen to music on when I'm driving, but that's my personal approach. I think you should always listen or have an ear for your vehicle. You should always have an eye on the temperature gauge. You should always understand how far you rev the car and how to drive the car with. If it's a diesel, you don't want to over rev it. They don't like revving,
It's terrible hearing people who are over revving diesels.
Totally. But I think I don't blame the people as much. It's ignorance.
I think they're driving their petrol half the time.
Yeah, well, they're used to driving a car.
Yeah.
So again, when people step out of their cars, and this is always the risk when you hire a vehicle. So when people are going to hire a car, I wish we could just take them before they're going to hire this car and have this experience and give them a whole bunch of training, that they could actually feel empowered, confident, to at least enjoy the experience with a level of confidence, so that, that's what you want to do, as opposed to getting in and going, oh my God, what is this? It feels all different, the clutch is hard, Braking is different because I got out of my car and now I hit the brakes and it takes me that much longer to stop. That's what people are not aware of.
Especially a fully loaded car, braking distance is compromised.
Clutch, using the clutch, people using the clutch is very different. I watch a lot of people's clutch control in four-wheel drives. Horrendous.
Riding the clutch all day long.
Riding the clutch, which is a no-no.
Just let the car pull its
not taking your foot off the clutch. So invariably I say to people, once you've pulled away gently,
put your foot to the
you want to put your foot to the side so it's not resting on the pedal, absolutely, because that can engage the thrust bearing, which means that that's now running and that can wear out your thrust bearing. But more importantly, when you're going to change, let's say, from second to third gear, put your foot in, engage the clutch, change gear, try and get your foot off the clutch completely before you start feeding power in, because you've got a heavy vehicle. And I watch people, the foot's not even off the clutch and they've already got the foot on the accelerator. So now the clutch hasn't completely locked up and it's spinning. So you're just wearing your clutch out and creating a lot more heat in the clutch there. So it's little things like that which I think are gold dust.
That's why hiring a vehicle, as you say, is such a great idea before you get out there.
Well, I think if you're not sure of doing overland travel, absolutely. But hiring a vehicle can be an advantage or disadvantage. So if you hired the vehicle and you had a really terrible experience, it broke down, you got let down, the equipment wasn't great, and you look at this and you think, was that the experience I wanted? So if you're going to do that, then go to a company who will give you a bit more hand-holding, who has a vehicle that's maybe kitted out to a better level of equipment. Understand what you're going in for. And quite often some of the clients, I'll say, have you ever driven a double cab 79 4.2? And they go, well, no. Yeah. Okay, well, why don't you hire that for the weekend?
Yeah, great idea.
Go and drive it. We'll have a bit of a session of training beforehand, so you've got a good idea of what you to expect. And that's
you send them to the Cedarburg for a weekend.
Cedarburg, anyway, just to go and have a outing in the vehicle. Now, it's that balance. So you're going to go. It's about expectations and managing expectations.
That's the key to life, is managing expectations.
Yeah, it so is.
Will actually says, really good video, no BS, just telling it straight. So he said, I must admit, I'm very impressed with the Goodyear Wrangler Adventure all-terrains. Even if money is no object, I'd still pick them over the Cooper and the BFGs.
And that he's not wrong. At the end of the day, so everyone has different experience, with different tires. And it's not like it's a bad tire. It's like you'll meet someone who has experience with a particular brand, and that's their brand. And maybe it was because when they were looking to buy something, someone advised them, they chose it, they've used it, they've had no reason to try something else. Or they've actually done the research and they've said, I've researched them all, these are the advantages and I'm going to use these. And actually, and sometimes people will choose a tire and say, it's actually quieter.
Yeah.
It's a little bit more comfortable on the road. Sometimes it's got better grip on the road in the wet. It's very difficult, again, when you're looking at let's take a tire as an example. Tires for me they're very misunderstood by people. People don't really.
Is that the most important thing on your truck?
Yeah, it's from a safety point of view, it's the one thing that can let you down and cause a massive accident. This is not understanding tire pressures, understanding how to repair a tire, just how to manage tire pressures for different environments. So if you're driving on different conditions, tar, dirt, sand, and your tire pressure is not just the tire. It actually, the tire is part of the suspension. I think I've talked this before,
exactly.
But tires are a really critical component of the vehicle. And of course, if the tire is too hard, it puts a lot of vibration through the vehicle, and you lose the ability to really steer nice and confidently. So when you're driving on the dirt roads, what do you want to achieve on a dirt road? I want to drive down this dirt road with my family in the car. I don't want to be gripping the steering wheel with this white knuckle grip because the car feels like it's dancing. We've all had that, with these corrugations and the tire's that hard, it's bouncing. And you feel like actually the car's, and you can lose it very easily.
It feels like ice skating.
Yeah, and if you go into a corner and you touch your brakes in the corner, you are gone. So understanding some of the basic key ways to drive a car and tire pressures. So your aim is to lower the pressures to a point where you can actually confidently drive on a road surface in a very safe way, and you're not going to build up too much heat in the tire, and you're going to risk the tire.
So on a standard 285 or 75 16, what would you be running tire pressure on tar, gravel, and serious off-road?
That's a great question, and I'll tell you now, you should never guess tire pressures. Tire pressures are related to the weight you carry. So if I'm going to put a lot of weight in a vehicle, I'm going to have to change those pressures to if it's very light. So again, what vehicle, what weight are you carrying? And understand that, you know, the tire needs to have a certain element of flex. If a tire is too hard, you know, yes, you've got a tire that's very hard. The patch that grips on the road changes, so you're getting, you know, less grip on the road. Yeah, people.
The only improvement is fuel economy.
Fuel economy. So would I place fuel economy against my safety?
Depends where you're driving. If you're doing the Nullarbor long straight road, you could get away with it.
Yeah, and even that, you know, accidents happen.
Well,
People
why are there so many accidents on straight roads?
You'll fall asleep. So driving long distance, one of the biggest things people do is they lose focus, they lose concentration, and they often fall asleep. And why? Quite often they're not properly hydrated, they haven't had enough sleep, they're distracted, they've got
cruise control, is that an issue?
You know, I suppose like anything, cruise control can actually relax you. There's that balance between, you know, I don't want to be too tense when I'm driving, because if I'm driving at a speed, so my most comfortable speed on tar road is about 110, okay? I don't really push it much more.
That's a sweet spot.
For me, it's a sweet spot, maybe even 100. It just depends on how I'm feeling.
Probably what do you do, about just under 2,000 revs?
Around that, and so the two things for me in that speed, I can relax a bit more, so I'm not having to use so much brain power. I'm taking in the scenery, which is what we're doing. You know, how often have people arrived at a place and they, so what did you see that animal on the side of the road? What animal?
Isn't it? For me, the journey is the best part.
Journey. So it's all about the journey. You know, it's all about the journey. You're going to certainly find that your concentration is going to lapse. And when people's concentration lapses, they're not focused, and when they're not focused, they can have an accident. Okay, so it's the same as when you're driving in the bush and you think, I'm driving in the bush, and around the corner another car comes, and you're both in sand tracks, you know, and you're both trying to get out of each other's ways. But if you were concentrating, you might have been looking through the bush, and you might have caught a glimpse of that car, got on your hooter, or slowed down or whatever. So it is.
So don't relax just because you're on slow road.
So it's a very fine balance. I don't want to be on, you know, that white knuckle grip, expending all my energy, because again, that time frame that you're driving for 5, 6 hours a day is a long period of time. And then managing that's very important.
But some people will go to the extreme; they'll be 10 hours in the saddle. That's when you're pushing it.
So that's all where you're pushing the boundaries and the envelope of risk, okay? And when you look back on accidents and you look back on what's gone wrong and you unravel the scenario, you'll look and say that actually it all started out because maybe they had set a parameter of going from this campsite to that campsite. We weren't quite sure of the road. We left late. Late meant we're trying to make up speed, okay? Then you feel you're getting tired, and how often have we pushed beyond that point of where we should have taken a stop and we should have got out the vehicle and had a stretch and relax because we're pushing to get
And often people then start driving faster to try and stay awake.
So you're trying to drive fast, stay awake, you're trying to get to your place, you're not sure where you're going, and actually, why all the pressure? Why not just go, you know what, we're not going to make that camp.
We'll get there when we get there.
That, or, you know, because I don't advocate driving at night, so I say to people, so you're not going to get there. So what's safer? Is it safer to really push hard late into the night to get to the camp?
Yeah.
Or do you actually go, you know what, it's going to be a lot safer just to wild camp?
Yeah.
And that's another story. But you know how to.
So by about 3, 4 o'clock, then you'll start surveying.
Well, you need to manage your time. You need to manage your energy. You need to, you know, and all that in overland travel is stressful. It takes it, you know, as I always say, when you're going into an environment of overland travel, it's new. It's changing. You know, when we live at home, we basically go on autopilot, and on autopilot, everything sort of happens the way we're used to it. And when you're traveling in overland travel, you're getting absolutely new experiences all the time. So this adds an element of stress, and stress depletes your energy. So, you know, what are we trying to? We're trying to manage your energy.
What are you trying to achieve from your journey?
Yeah. So what are you trying to achieve? It's a great question. How are you managing your energy on
what
your
are you
journey?
there to do?
And how do we manage our energy every day?
I mean, energy, you could spend an hour just talking on energy.
Let's let Joe talk about energy. Joe has so much to say
about energy. Don't some people say a lot of us are made up of energy?
Well, energies, yeah.
It's all there.
It's energies all around us.
Exactly. And Byron Lewis, another question, great videos. Why aren't more companies in South Africa making flatbed canopies like we see in Australia? And then and Nios replies saying RSI canopies in Zimbabwe. I had a look at the website. Look like decent looking canopies.
RSI.
Yeah.
They built beautiful canopies.
Yeah.
Look, it's a market that was developed in a big way in Australia, and I think it largely developed around. And I'm going to get better input from the Australians. So guys, help me out there.
And we do have a lot of Australians.
We do, yeah, and I'm sure they're going to correct me on this. But this is, I think, the Australian market is very much a man with a van, and I lived in Australia for a couple of years. Your tradies,
yeah.
And your tradies are guys who they build up the economy. It's a massive part of the economy. I love it. It's so good. The guys have all got their own little businesses, and of course they have their truck.
They love their 79s,
and they've got their ability to kit it out. And of course, they've developed a market, and I wish we could have some of that here because I think they're great platforms. So you can get people who will build a tray for you in South Africa and build a unit on the back. There are companies that will do custom work. And like anything, if it's built one-off, you're going to be testing and trying it out, and the development work is around how it's been built. So of course, when you're going to embark down that route, you want to make sure you're choosing someone who's absolutely going to build it properly. And it's going to use the right components and the right mountings, and they're not going to be too heavy. And so again, if it's products like the tray in Australia has been tested by thousands and thousands and thousands of vehicles. So you can look at that and say that's a great product. It works. It's tested the mounting points, the storage boxes.
Is that a Toyota tray?
Well, I'm using the Toyota trays. It's
no, I mean the ones in Australia.
No, I think they do them for all vehicles.
Aftermarket?
They're all, it's an aftermarket. Maybe this.
The pros and cons of being able to fold down the sides, like the Australian ones.
For us in overland travel, no, you don't really need to fold down the sides. I mean, those are really giving you the access. Again,
so what would be why would
so a flat tray is to build something on. So you're going to be building up, much like what Andrew did. I mean, he's got a camper body going on top of the tray.
So it basically gives you more space if you don't have the side of the back. Like
so it's giving you access, different access. Okay. If people come to me and they say, "Well, can you build a tray from scratch and can you build the whole thing up?" So if I took a double cab with the load tray as we get it in South Africa, so it's got fixed sides, it's got a tailgate at the back, and it's got a canopy that drops on it, and I want to replicate that with a flat tray like you get in Australia. When you open the side, you're going to get great access because you haven't got the side. Oh. So that's very attractive. I like that feature. Does it make it wrong in what we use? No, it's just different. We build different vehicles. So we have a canopy where the side opens up and then you go in and then you go down. So we've got that side. Do we need it all to open up? Well, it's not a need. It's actually just a different design. So I'm very focused on if I can use the Toyota load body with a canopy, that works very well. If we had trays that had been built or we brought in from Australia and they were well tested, and I knew that we're not going to test out whether this tray is going to work. It's well built. It's been tested. Fantastic.
You just bolt off the
you bolt off and you bolt on. Yeah. They're well designed.
Is there a gap in the market for that kind of thing in South Africa?
I think there absolutely is. I think the crossover would be fantastic. So come on, guys, let's build some.
Full Marsh signature track. Moving swiftly on, another Lee Westcott said he's been into 2 dealerships in the UK and can't find the 79 series Cruiser. What's going on?
They hide them. They don't have them.
Similar to North America.
Yeah, I think in England, I lived there 18 years, and I used to have to import any of those vehicles out of the Middle East. We couldn't get them from Gibraltar. We had to bring them from the Middle East. So, they're not available there, and I guess it's I don't know the ins and outs, but Toyota would probably look at it and say, is it viable to bring that model in when you've got a big market which is predominantly Land Rover?
Yeah.
And it's going to be an economic.
It's a different country. It's
different, and
you don't need it 79 in the UK.
You don't, and I think those who've got it like it. But it's obviously you've got to for them to bring a model in, why did we lose the Troop here in South Africa? We lost it because Toyota went and looked and said, listen, we don't sell enough of them. We want them for our overland market.
Yeah.
But we're quite a small market. So if that's all
and our mining shrank a wee bit, which didn't help as well.
Yeah. So, models, I guess, are introduced into markets where they're going to get the best returns. It's not about our niche is last on the list. We use them for overland. We are probably the smallest users. The mines are massive in what they use model-wise, So the farming community. But the overlanding fraternity is actually, in South Africa, it's fair. It's big enough because people have them recreationally. For sure, the double cab's a very, very popular vehicle, and so is the Hilux double cab. It's a nice, comfortable size vehicle.
Absolutely. And Defender Mods and Travels, a cool guy from the UK, he's got a 90 Defender 90. He says storage drawers in the rear are great, but expensive, heavy, and the sliders use significant volume. They may be convenient, but they aren't always the best solution.
When we built storage systems into the back of Land Rovers, there were two ways of doing it, because you've got the wheel arches, which drop off, so that you've got that, and then of course you've got the floor, which is pretty flat. So unlike the Toyotas where the wheel arches are sort of by themselves, there's a whole long wheel arch in the back of, let's say, any Land Rover you look at. And the older ones, they were more squarish. So putting a drawer in, definitely you're losing space, because when you open the back door, the drawer has to clear the hinge there, and of course you're losing, and they're not wrong. As far as weight goes, I did find companies that made really good quality drawers that were very lightweight in the UK, and I found that they were bent and made with weight in mind, and they were light. They were very light. They were strong enough. I think their design was designed with strength. So you can get them. I think a lot of the South African drawers have been brought into the UK, and some of them are over-engineered. They're much heavier than they need to be. And he's not wrong. And equally, what I often used to do for people is I just put a board across that, and we just slide boxes underneath. These plastic ammunition boxes. And we put stuff you're not going to go into too often. So there's so many solutions around storage. And I think, like anything, when you're choosing what you build your storage out of, that's a significant weight you're adding to your vehicle. So to keep it lightweight, you want to design it with strength in mind.
The UK overland market, is it still on the uptick?
Look, the UK overland market was fascinating when I was there and drove it. And yeah, people in the overland forum in the UK absolutely still want to travel. Are there the specialists there that actually can build vehicles? They're probably less than they were. I think a few of the good guys and significant guys have dropped out. And sometimes when you've got a business in this industry, it can burn you out. I've seen that. I've seen that with a few guys in the UK, and we used to collaborate, and it was just all consuming. And you've got to be very careful with that. People are hungry. They want your time. So when you're able to share it like this, it's probably less invasive than you've got 50 calls a day and people pouring into your workshop to meet with you.
Exactly. You can reach thousands of people.
You can reach bigger, more people, and you can actually measure the time you put and take time back when you need it for yourself. So yeah, it's interesting.
Absolutely. Billy Wesley says, another entertaining, informative video. I never tired listening to Paul's articulate narration.
Thank you.
It just amazes me. It motivates me and encourages me in the middle of lockdown in the UK, and makes my heart ache not to travel. Well done to Africa Sideways, and well done to Paul Marsh, excursionaire extraordinaire.
Well, it's a teamwork, right? You and I have done a lot of work together, and this has been fantastic. So I'm glad people enjoy it, and it's good fun. We enjoy it. We're going to continue it for a good while, and keep adding. So
it's been
thank you.
A very enriching experience. And then Tons is back for another question. Now, I'm really honest, the series with Paul is so informative, and the content is, we get a little controversial here, is much more valuable compared to all the other guides, YouTubers. I'm not going to mention the names, you know who they are. Please keep doing what you're doing, and let's grow this channel to the size it deserves.
Well, it's a lovely compliment, and I don't want to ever take away from the hard work that people in other channels put in, because it takes time and energy to put yourself out there. You put yourself up for criticism. You put yourself up for a lot of things. None of us are perfect. I'm certainly not perfect by any means, and I do and will make mistakes. And I think the important thing is that there are different needs for different people, and people, if you can take everyone for their intention. What is their intention? There's some great YouTubers out there.
And they all have one thing in common, is the love of overlanding.
Yeah, they love overlanding. We have a passion that we're sharing. We want to share our knowledge. And I think if you just go back and say, this, I may not have enjoyed this, equally people, we all enjoy different people and different characters. But I think take into consideration the energy, the time that someone's putting themselves out there, and also their intention. But thank you.
There's a lot of good stuff out there.
It's amazing.
Have you ever seen a Defender owner without grubby hands?
Listen, the poor guys, they get so much taken out of them, But when you see someone, I had a lovely couple, and they'd driven down from Saudi all the way down through Africa, and they got here, and they'd had their challenges. And the car was a great vehicle and very well prepared. And he just looked, and his passion and his excitement, and he's got his vehicle here, and you can talk about the problems and you get through them. And some of the best experiences I've had when we've taken groups of vehicles, on through cross countries in workshops when the people you're working together with the mechanics.
And that can be the most memorable part of the whole trip.
And you're having fun, and the guy's fixing your car, and it's maybe an interaction you wouldn't have maybe had, so. It's a different experience. Yeah.
It's a beautiful world out there. Sometimes if you watch too much TV, you just get bombarded with what's wrong, but there's a lot of good stuff going on out there.
There's a lot. I think that for me it's like, a radio channel. Is it Smile FM? Only positive news?
Yeah.
I think that's right. Anyway.
I stopped listening to the news.
I don't listen to the news. But that said, I do like the positive output people have. We can all be negative.
FM, that's a good name for a radio station. We all could do a lot more.
So it's just about being positive. We can always look at the worst. What to say? Cup half empty or cup half full? You choose.
Or the cup overfloweth. Whichever you want. And Jason Joe says, very wise advice. Listen, observe, and implement what Paul is saying.
Okay, that's very kind. Hard-learned lessons. Hey, I think make no mistake. I've paid my price. I've made some big mistakes over the years.
Lucky to be even sitting here.
Yeah, and lucky to be sitting here because I had a fatal car accident driving a four-wheel drive in South America. Flipped the car, rolled it 6 times, and broke my neck. And I'm sitting here today because the doctor next to me wasn't injured. That satellite phone worked, and one of the top neck surgeons in South America put me back together. So, so with that hindsight experience, I look at life very differently.
And I'm sure your driving style has changed now.
It's actually really interesting.
You were tired at that stage, weren't you?
Yeah, so when I went back on what caused that accident, we'd been on the road for 3 months, and we had massive responsibility, huge number of vehicles on the rally, and of course too fast, too tired, massively too tired, totally exhausted, and taking risks beyond our capabilities because we were that tired. So again, when you unpack what went wrong, you could see the mistakes. So I'm really vehement when I train people about safety, is because that is my highest priority. And if it's not yours, then please don't work with me, because I'm not interested.
Exactly.
It's that important to me because I've nearly paid the price. So people get it, and for sure, people want to learn, and they want. I don't want people to make those mistakes. So yeah.
Absolutely. Christopher Saki says, always an icon. Keep it up, legend. There you go. More love for Mr. Paul Marsh. And best engine for overlanding in a 105. Mark Winter says, thanks for the ideas. Just by the way, the engine concern was not the 1H, it's the 1H.
HDT. Yeah. And
can you clear that up?
We were standing filming, and I wasn't concentrating, and I have to own it. And he's absolutely correct. It's not the 1H then. So we're actually going to do.
So even the best make mistakes.
We all make mistakes, and thank you for the correction. So we're going to film, you and I are going to film the different engines and all the different cruises. I think it's going to be quite nice for people to see, and we can probably talk about the weaknesses and the pluses and minuses. And we'll find some really old vehicles that we've got floating around the workshops. But basically, you know, the 1HZ it's got a name that people call it, the hill finder. And I nearly rolled off my chair when someone said to me, he says, "Oh, it's a hill finder." I said, "What do you mean a hill finder?" He says, "Man, it goes so slowly. You've got to look for the hills out there." So it's the first time I'd heard that. But the 1HZ 6-cylinder is like the workhorse donkey of Land Rover.
Is that the most reliable diesel engine in the world?
Oh, you know, I couldn't say in the world. You know, I don't
Top
have
three?
experience. You know, at the end of the day, in the four-wheel drive industry, it has definitely been a motor that has stood around for a long time. So if you're looking at how good a motor is, you've got to look at how long has it been in the market. You know, so the earlier motors were all good motors, but the 1HZ has sort of stood the test of time to the fact that we can still buy them now. For new vehicles, you know, some of the vehicles, well, all the vehicles we try and order for our safari companies that we build fleets for, they all want the 1HZs, you know, because it's a slower vehicle, so it's probably less, people aren't going to speed as much.
Exactly.
So the motor that we were talking about, so most of the vehicles came out, the 105s came out with that 6-cylinder 4.2 diesel, and then you got the 12 valve, and then you got the 24 valve, okay, which came out with the turbo. So first of all, let's go back. You got the 12 valve 1HZ 6-cylinder, beautiful motor, and then they added a turbo on it, and they called it the 1HDT. And I personally like that motor, and it's just a beautiful, strong motor. And then you got the 24 valve version of that one, and
More power, more fuel economy?
it's got more power. It's got a different torque curve, and I'd have to compare them more technically. There's definitely, it's a more complex motor, you know, in a sense. So, you know, you're going to find that it's got a little bit more electronics on it. I like the motor. It definitely has more power on it. But I must say, personally, for me, the earlier 1HDT. With the turbo, the 4.2 with the turbo.
Turbo replacement, how often are you finding you have to replace turbos on cruisers?
You know, you would, if you were going to rebuild your engine, then you refurbish the turbo. You know, turbo shouldn't need to be replaced if you're looking after the motor properly. Turbos really get replaced when people don't look after the motors. And I think that's the challenge. It's like changing, if you don't change oil often enough. And you know, there's a small oil feed that goes through to the turbo. So if your turbo doesn't get oil, it's going to have premature wear. So it's like anything in the engine. If good oil lubrication get around and you're changing your filters often, then you're going to find parts wear less. And I've seen engines where they've done high mileage and the turbos are still good. They may be a bit worn, but they're still good. But if I'm going to rebuild an engine, we will absolutely recondition the turbo.
So somebody can get a truck from you, a truck for a lifetime.
Look, I mean, what we're doing with the older vehicles, we're taking the older trucks, and it does cost money to refurbish these trucks. It's not a cheap process to rebuild and refurbish an old truck. What you are getting is you're getting a simple truck that's got long life, and there's no reason why you can't build back in to that truck another lifetime of use, you know, where you can actually use this truck to drive many, many thousands of kilometers. No reason.
Isn't it great seeing these old trucks back on the road, back in the bush?
Oh, look, it's, you know, I love the older vehicles, you know, even the older 40 series, the 45s. I mean, they're beautiful.
Like Ruthie's one in Australia. Oh, it's gorgeous.
So it's absolutely spectacular, I think, to see those old ones. But, you know, times have moved on, and of course you're looking at comfort and people are looking at safety. And, you know, so the balance is, we've come to a nice compromise now where we are now, where we're saying, you know, we can still get these engines, we can still get these vehicles, and that's what, in our time now, we're building these vehicles up.
$1 million question, how much longer are they going to still make the 79 for?
Look, the 79, I think as long as it's got demand, you know, and it certainly is a vehicle that's got a very high demand. I don't know the figures on what the sales figures are, but certainly it's a very attractive vehicle, because you've now got a vehicle that you can actually put a family in with enough space to carry. And you actually could do with more space. I mean, I guess there's a calling for a vehicle that, for our niche, our overland niche, where you could have a vehicle that's got more load carrying capacity to really comfortably transport and sleep 4 people, you know. And at the moment, you know, it's very difficult to put 4 people living in one camper unit without it being pretty squashed up and you know, You could do it for small periods of time.
7-seater double cab.
You're dreaming.
I'm dreaming. Defender mods and travel again with more comments. Agree with almost everything said. Well, that's something positive for a channel. The channel is very different. It's more about the philosophy of overlanding travel rather than nuts and bolts, and not too much focus on equipment brands. Although it is noted that all of the vehicles are Toyotas. Bear in mind this is a Defender 90 owner.
I think if we were filming this in England, we'd have a lot more Land Rovers because we built a lot more. I do build Land Rovers and I do get them out for people. And currently we've got 3 on the go, But certainly the market.
Oh, so you do have 3 Landies on the go at the moment?
I do, yeah.
Okay, so it's not a small part of your business then?
No, not at all. I mean, I think, predominantly people will go for Land Cruisers because they've got a reputation for the reliability. We can find them and source them easier. You can find Land Rovers here. But I'll be honest, I would rather build a Land Cruiser than a newer Land Rover Puma, let's say, because I've had experience where we had a whole fleet of them for one of the companies that...
That's when you see when things go wrong.
And they had a lot of things, but that did go wrong. And when you're an enthusiast, it's fantastic. But of course, when people are hiring vehicles, they don't want things to go wrong. So, and of course the footprint for Toyota is massive as far as support goes. So it's my preference. It doesn't make it... I love driving the Land Rovers. I mean, I drove a Discovery pretty much around the world.
At Disco One, your impressions of that vehicle?
So I owned the 300 TDI, 300 TDI Discovery, 300 TDI.
Is that the 2.5 turbo diesel?
Yeah. You've got the 200 TDI and then you've got the 300 TDI engine.
And the 4-litre gas goes low.
Yeah. They were nice to drive. And I loved my truck. I really did. I spent many kilometers driving around the world with that truck on many expeditions. I put a roll cage in it. It was beautiful. And when I sold it, I think it did another 2 trips through Africa, maybe even more clients. It was originally a Dutch vehicle and I bought it for a couple who did a big trip. And then at the end I bought it off them. And then I continued using it for myself. So, it served me very well and I really enjoyed it. And I've owned a 90 and had a 110. And so, it was definitely in England. I loved having that brand and we were very much, we specialized in Land Rover and Land Cruiser.
999, Mr. Khaled, you're going to love this one. I think that Toyota should make a 70 series and call it Paul Marsh.
Oh, I think a lot more people deserve that honor. Look, the Land, it would be my dream to actually take a vehicle and build it into an overland vehicle that people could literally buy off the shelf.
Standardise.
Yeah, standardise.
And wouldn't this be the best time to buy those vehicles?
Well, look, I mean, if you were going to do it, this is the time. If you came and said, okay, well, let's build a fleet of vehicles that people can buy that is standardized, what really works. But I think half the fun is also, when you dream of your vehicle, you dream of personalizing it. Half the journey that we all experience is doing the research and discussing what you want in your truck. And that's where it becomes very different for people,
Yeah.
So, you can't take away as much as you could buy something off the shelf, which we get. We get a very good Toyota Land Cruiser off the shelf, which is very capable.
And the 200, your impressions of that? I don't see you kitting too many of those out.
I don't. We do a few of them, okay. But personally, for big overland expedition trips, it's a very capable vehicle. It really is, and it's. I've got friends in Australia, and they drive theirs, and it's fantastic. They love it. But I think space-wise, again, I've had people who've owned 200s, and they've come away and they've gone, I'm just looking for a bit more space. It doesn't make it a bad vehicle or a bad choice. You can absolutely make that vehicle into a lovely overland vehicle. It just depends on what your needs are.
And where you're going.
And if you're going for the longer you go, you probably want more space to store stuff. And so it's,
Horses for courses. Well, Mrs. Karunda, I'm not even going to try go for the first time. Hi Paul, thanks for sharing your experience. I own a Triton and want to get an overlanding car like a Petrol or an old cruiser. What's the difference between coil springs and leaf springs and the comfort on gravel roads?
There is a big difference. I mean, I think you're going to find that if you're driving a vehicle with coil springs, it is a lot more comfortable. you've got a coil sprung, you're not going to carry as much load, So it's generally the pickups, like the 79 series with leaf springs, because you have the ability to carry more load in the back. That's how they designed them. And which would be more comfortable? I think the coil sprung would be a more comfortable vehicle. You don't have to go for the new vehicles. I mean, I've built a lot of the old Prados, the old 90 series.
Gorgeous car.
They're great. They're just really. It's a small vehicle.
But it's got that. It's got quite a high roof, though, the Prado.
But for two people, it works really well. So yeah.
And that's your town car, is a little two-door one.
I've got a two-door one, I love it. I looked long and hard for that. So it's perfect. It carries my paramotor around so I can go flying when I'm not doing it.
So if you see anybody in the air, it might just be Paul. And Ethan Crowley, I saw Paul's grey 80 series cruiser parked outside Raffles Hotel in Cambodia last year when he came through for the Myanmar rally.
Yeah.
Would have been chuffed to have a chat with him.
Oh, I'm so sorry I missed you. I would have loved that. Yeah, we were doing Southeast Asia with a group of classic cars, and I did the mechanical support on that. And Jo, my wife, was with me, and we these guys, they stay in beautiful places, and some of them are lovely hotels. But we do explore. When you take these old classic cars, which is something I really do enjoy.
And that must have been opening up Myanmar when it just became open to the
no, it wasn't so long ago. So Myanmar has been open for a good few years.
Okay.
But
the north must be majestic.
It was spectacular, because the rally organizer, Bruno, and his wife and his team from Destination Rally are a Belgian-based company. And so we work with them to support the rally. And it was in combination with a rally group that we started in England called Global Rally Organisation many years ago. And so every couple of years we pull together a rally for enthusiasts with their classic cars and literally take them on some pretty hectic roads. We drove some tough roads. You'd question taking
Isn't that quite fun, taking a car that on some of these passes that aren't really supposed to be there?
Well, it's we drove through the Cardamom Mountains, and I think after the people had got their cars through, they went back and thought, wow, if you probably knew what road you were going on, you wouldn't have driven it.
Exactly.
But to be said, it was spectacular. It was really an amazing trip. Beautiful part of the world, beautiful people, very humbling. Especially, we went through northern Vietnam as well. And watching people there building roads by hand. And I mean by hand. So you're watching teams crush rock with hammers and then carrying it and packing the road. And then taking, the only machinery they had was a steamroller. And then men with barrels, big 210 litre barrels, which they filled partially with bitumen, between two men walking up and down, letting bitumen go through. Oh, gee, it was just incredible to see them. They lived on the roads, basically, these road gangs, men, women, children. Yeah, so
and gravel, spectacular gravel roading twisting through the forests and whatnot.
Stunning areas. I mean, some of the pictures behind you, especially up there.
And here we have a life of travel here behind you.
So every time Joe and I do a trip, a rally, we come back and we choose one or two of our nicest pictures and we put them on our wall here. And that's what we do. It's so nice. It's for us, not for sharing, but it's lovely to do that. Yeah.
Okay, John Sandlin says, though not in a purpose overland vehicle, I was able to design my WD-21 Pathfinder for extended camping trips. With Paul and Andrew's teaching, it has inspired me, and I was confident and able to create a truck that suits my needs. Priceless info. Thanks for all the grateful work. Cheers from New York City.
Fantastic. And Andrew's been doing this for many, many years, and he and I have collaborated on many trips and putting stuff together. And he's dedicated his life through books and videos and DVDs, and just great. So I have huge respect for the people in the market. I haven't had the privilege of meeting Ronnie yet, and I'm sure I would love to do that as well. He's also a great inspiration. So
Andrew's like the godfather of overlanding.
Andrew's shared. He's an amazing storyteller. And I think, he has filled a great niche in the market. I met Andrew many, many years ago he's South African as I am, but I think we met first.
There's some contention because he still maintains he's British.
Well, yeah, British origin, absolutely. And but we met when I was still in England, I think, many years ago. So yeah, it's been a path we've walked, and he's certainly put a lot out there, and I think that's what we need, And Overland Journal with Scott and his team and the guys they're putting in America there, it's fantastic.
What I like about Andrew is he's not afraid to be controversial, and if he doesn't like something, he'll say it. A lot of times these days, people will kind of tiptoe and also take product for commercial reason, and so it's nice to have Andrew's sort of just bluntness, so to speak.
You know what? And I respect that. It's fine. It's he's very straight down the line. If he doesn't like it, he tells you he doesn't like it. That's great. And that's, everyone has a place. I don't think any of us are the same. I'm not trying to be like Andrew. I respect and admire some of the work he's done because he's a very, very good videographer, and he's, going on watching him capture imagery is just...
Must be like watching an artist.
What's interesting is when you do a trip and you do all the shoot, he captures all the imagery, and then you see it come together. That is an art form. He is gifted in how he can put it together, and the music he chooses, and it's a given talent, and he's very, very good.
And his daughter looks like quite a talented person.
Very talented. Kate is amazing. Yeah, no, Kate's great. She's got fantastic talent. She's definitely following her dad's footsteps.
I'm sure she's got the eye on the 105.
Yeah, she's used it. Trust me.
And then Dacia Project asked BFG KO2 versus the Cooper ST Max in wet conditions for braking distance.
Yeah, so I can't give you honest replies on that, because there's going to be tests that have been done on that vehicle, and it's also going to depend on the weight of the vehicle that you're on, the conditions in the road. If you drive out and it's just fallen with rain and it hasn't rained for months, the road's a lot more slippery. So, it's not something I sort of go into without proper test data. So I'm not here to run a product up or down, because I'd rather go back to Cooper and to BF Goodrich. I think there's really, if you look up, there's probably really good data on that.
Yeah, there's definitely the braking distance
and
data.
I think, if any product is tested, it absolutely needs to be tested properly with proper parameters set in place, because there's no point guessing and thumb-sucking about a product, because you can do more harm than good, and it's not fair to me.
And it's horses for courses. You take a BFG and compare it to a highway tyre on tar, it's not going to... But put that tyre off-road, that's when it comes alive.
Yeah. And I think there's always, when you're choosing any tyre, you try to choose a tyre to a balance of different conditions. So you're looking and saying, I'm going to choose a tyre to take me safely from here to there. This is the vehicle I'm driving. These are the conditions I'm going over. What is my choice? And like anything, there's going to be compromises and there's going to be value in each. You're never going to find the perfect solution, but you're going to find something that you feel comfortable with. I always say to people, if it feels good and the knowledge people who are sharing it with you makes sense, go for it.
The thing I like about BFG is they haven't gone away from the very, very strong sidewall, which in overlanding is
look, sidewalls are very, very important. A lot of tyres have gone with amazing technology that they've improved in many aspects, how they've improved the design of tyres. And I think, once you start comparing tyres, you really need to know what you're talking about if you're going to compare one against the next, to be absolutely critical on what it does. I mean, I've had amazing experience with both those brands. I haven't measured braking distances. There's always a debate, because you're taking a tyre that you're trying to get good mileage out of. So any tyre, let's rest aside, any tyre you're trying to get very good mileage out of, the compound's going to be slightly harder to give you the extra miles, and if it's a softer compound. So if you compared a snow tyre and a dry road tyre, and you felt them, they're very different. They're doing very different features and trying to keep you safe on the road.
And in terms of, I'm not going to mention the brand, but I had a test vehicle that had a very good tyre on, but I had 2 leaks on the valve. I think a bit of dust got in there. Do you find do the tyre companies team up with the valve makers, or is it 2 separate things? How does it work?
I don't think valves are made by different companies.
So that comes with the rim.
Well, you'll get the rim, and then you'll get, people will buy different brands of valves depending on the tyre fitter that's fitting your tyre. So you're going to get the tyre supplied.
So you might have the best tyre in the world, but if your valve's not out of scratch.
No, generally, I mean, most valves you'll find pretty much I don't get a lot of problems with valves. Where I do get problems where people don't put dust caps on. And don't go put the shiny ones on, because the shiny ones the kids also like. So
The maple one.
yeah,
They look really cool.
They look great until you come back and go, hey, where am I?
Yeah.
So no, just plastic ones. And I always carry a bunch of them spare, because if you do lose one or someone forgets to put it back, then it's important that you put a cap on, because once dust gets in there and then you fill your tire, dust can actually stop it from sealing properly.
Yeah.
And then you have that
There's a little
problem.
slowly.
Yeah, and if that's the case, always the old adage is when you pump your tire up, take a bit of spit from your mouth and smear it over the top of the valve stem, and then see if it bubbles. And if it bubbles, your valve is leaking. People often don't look to see if a tire has gone down, where the leak is. My first thing I check is a valve, because a valve is one of the most key things that can leak. And then check that they're tight. A little valve tool, put it in, check that it's tight.
Zach Khan says, great videos, Paul. Please share your advice on the journey of shipping a vehicle to Pakistan. I'm planning a trip to take my own vehicle to Pakistan, so any tips and advice would be great, thank you.
From where is he leaving?
Zach Khan, he doesn't say where he's leaving, but his destination is Pakistan.
Okay. Well, I've driven through Pakistan many years ago, when we drove across from London to Sydney. I need more information.
But a more broad question: shipping to different countries.
Shipping is very easy, and I think whenever you're shipping a vehicle, the important part is to find a very reliable shipping line, so you get the shipping line that actually floats on the water and owns the ships, and then you get agents either side that clear. Okay, and that's the important part. Your clearing agents. So, you're going to need a certain amount of documentation when you ship. So you're going to, depending on where the car's going. If I'm shipping a car from South Africa, it's registered in South Africa. To take it out of South Africa, I need to get a carnet, a passage, which is a document that allows the vehicle to move. And I'm not exporting the vehicle. So it's going to go for a period of time on this carnet, which is allocated for normally a year, that length.
So it's like a car visa.
It's like a car passport. Okay, and that allows you to take the vehicle out without, I'm not exporting it. I'm taking it out for a period of time to bring it back to the country of origin. And if that carnet expires, you can renew it if you're still traveling for more than a year. And you'll need your registration documents and obviously passport and copies of all that. Now, you get a very good clearing agent, and what they will do is they will actually run the whole process. You'll bring your vehicle to the port or to their warehouse, and they will actually then take the whole process. It's always a good idea to prepare your car properly for shipping. And when I say prepare your car properly, no food. They will want you to have the fuel tanks almost empty. Okay, and that's so that you can ship it as non-hazardous. And you'll have to be able to disconnect the batteries, which is a good thing. So if you've got auxiliary batteries, I always say to people, charge them up fully, you disconnect them, put something on there, and if you've got the main battery, leave a spanner in the car that actually, they can undo your battery and they can disconnect it, because the worst thing that happens is what they do is they put your vehicle into a container. And I always advise people, be there when they put your vehicle in the container. See exactly how they load it into the container. See how it's strapped down. So when a vehicle is put in a container, it's driven into the container. You normally leave the keys with it, okay? I normally put the tire pressures a bit harder, because if it's going to be on the water for a good length of time, it's good to put the tire pressures a bit harder, making sure that the vehicle can go into the container. So if you've got a height restriction, make sure you understand the height of your vehicle and the height of the container, because you get containers in two heights, standard height and a high capacity. It's more expensive to use a high capacity, but it's a lot less hassle than taking your whole tent and roof rack off and storing it next to your car. So ideally, the vehicle goes in the container, and then what they'll do is they'll chock the wheels with wood. They'll take big blocks of wood and they'll nail it in behind the tire, behind each tire, and I like them to do it in front of each tire as well, because it's a heavy vehicle. Before I take the vehicle to the shipping lines, I also like to prepare the car so that I can reduce the amount of surface rust.
Is it strapped down to the bottom of the...
It gets strapped down. So once it's blocked in, so let's go through the process. It gets driven in, it gets blocks knocked into the floor. The container's a wooden floor, and then knock it in with nails through the wood in front and behind your vehicle. That's just to stop it moving. Okay, and then it gets strapped. Normally it gets strapped through the wheels and through the wheels and onto the sides of the container, and then I also like them to take from the bumpers and strap it down. So I make sure that I'm happy to pay for more straps. I need to make sure the guys properly strap the vehicle and
So how many points would you have? So 8 points of
well, four the wheels.
Yeah.
They'll strap the wheels down,
Yeah.
okay, and they'll often take it.
rear bump, front bump.
You need to do. I do that for my
Yeah.
vehicle. I do that because the vehicle, if they strap the wheels or the axles down, you've got to be careful. Straps don't go over the brake lines. That's
Yeah.
important. And they don't. Any strap is not going to rub or damage anything on the vehicle. So if they're strapping the wheels down, sometimes they take it through the rims. People have different ways of strapping it down. The important part is the axles can't move. What can move though is the body can still move on the springs. Okay, so by putting the four corners, the bumpers down, you're just reducing that amount of movement there. And that's all you're trying to do. And then the battery needs to be disconnected so that no power can be drained out of it. And then what they'll do is they will then seal the containers with a seal which has got a number on it, and you'll photograph that. So I take photographs of when it's all in, when it's strapped down. I photograph it, doors closed, container number and container code. And they normally good shipping line will always do that for you. And then you've got to take insurance. So if anything happens to your vehicle, you need to provide them with an inventory of what you need, and take a photographic inventory as well. And remember that on the other side when it arrives, you ideally need to be there to take it out the container.
Exactly.
Otherwise it gets taken out, put in a warehouse, and that's when you can start losing stuff because you're not in control of your vehicle.
Exactly.
So there is quite a lot to shipping a vehicle. It's very simple. The key is to make sure that you get a very good clearing agent where you start from where you're sending it to and where it's being received. Make sure that the documents that you're sending with the vehicle are sent by the one clearing agent to the other clearing agent. Because it doesn't help when your vehicle arrives and your documents are still in transit because the guy forgot to send them. Now, good clearing agents are on top of this. Absolutely. And that's why it's gold dust to have good clearing agents who will help you through this process.
Nice.
Your vehicle's like your home, okay? And you're going to personalize your home. And by personalizing your home, you're going to put little creature comforts. You're going to find spaces for things that you all like. And that's where, when it's a couple, it's so important that you both decide on where you're putting stuff. And trust me, your wife's going to have things that she knows are important. So in our glove box, we've got a mini first aid kit. And in there, Joe will have stuff in there that maybe it's something for my lips, or maybe it's something for a headache, or maybe it's something, just small. And it's right there.
Painkiller.
And she knows that that's really convenient, and we'll just have that there. So it's the teamwork of building up your vehicle, but understanding what are your needs and where is it going to go, and make sure it has the same place. It takes a few trips to build that up. So pockets that we put on the vehicles made out of canvas or whatever are really there to give you access to something conveniently that you can reach there, grab it, and put it back there until you decide to move it to another place. But don't be the one who moves it and puts it somewhere else, and the next time your wife or you are looking for it, it won't be popular.
Put it back in the same space.
Yeah.
And then tons again, thanks for the opportunity. You have a 2009 Prado 4-litre V6 with 450,000 Ks on the clock. Never given a day's travel. I've replaced wear and tear. I'd like to ask your opinion on in building this vehicle up for sub-Saharan Africa. Aside from the obvious lack of fuel efficiency, what sort of things should you be looking out for trying to deck out a Prado 4-litre?
Even we spoke about the 100 series earlier. It's independent front suspension. The Prado's
Similar sort of scenario.
Similar setup. So your biggest challenge is, one of the weaknesses is steering rack. So on the live axles, you've got a steering box. It's much stronger. It's more robust. The one weakness on the Prados is the steering rack. The 100 series Land Cruiser as well. Your steering rack takes
very good engine of that 4-litre V6, isn't it?
It's bomb-proof.
Yeah.
It really is bomb-proof, and I absolutely agree with you. Things like on that motor, you can measure compressions. If the motor's running sweetly, it's not using oil, and it's keep driving.
Exactly.
But you need to change
itself.
things. You need to look at things like auxiliaries. What's the alternator like? What's the starter like? Where's the water pump being changed? And look at components that can wear out on that motor. And then look at things like hoses. People forget that those hoses for the heater have been there probably since new.
Yeah.
And they're tired. And if a hose bursts, your motor's gone.
And the old radiators.
So sorry, when you're going through any vehicle like that to build it up, understand the weak points of the car and make sure you address those. So on those Prados, ball joints, upper and lower ball joints, absolutely genuine Toyota, put new parts in, build them back up. Wheel bearings would be another thing I would be looking at doing and saying, you know what, they've done their mileage, so how much more life do you want out of that component? So this is where it comes into preventative maintenance.
So instead of spending the money on buying a new car, throw a bit of money into the old one and give it another.
And I think that's a balance. Okay, so that's always a balance, because sometimes you can put a lot of money into an old car and you're pouring good money after bad, the old adage goes. But in a four-wheel drive, if you've got a good solid body, a good solid chassis, and the interior and all looks good, you're weighing up, what's it going to cost me to build and sort this vehicle out? Now, if he had a problem with his engine, he could pick up another second-hand engine for not a lot of money and put it in. Beautiful. So you know, I would be looking at.
And you said he's getting 13.5 liters per 100, which is not bad.
Look, any fuel consumption depends on how you drive.
I suppose that's going down a slippery mine shaft.
No, I'm pretty sure he's probably driving very carefully. But that's it's a small indicator of the fact that he definitely, I'm sure, looks after that vehicle, especially to get that sort of mileage on it. And credit to you, looking after the truck like that. They are fantastically capable vehicles.
So you could get to 1 million K on that, theoretically.
You know, cars get that mileage if you look after them. Things do wear out. What you're trying to do when you're looking at an old car with high mileage is trying to look and say, what has had really severe use and what's going to let me down that I need to change?
Absolutely. And Chris Saul, another one, great videos. Interesting question here. He saw that you were designing a troopy for 4 people. He'd like to know a little bit more about how you get your head around that.
Okay, so generally troopies,
the family with the 2 small kids.
Small children, absolutely. So we're still busy with that design, and it's actually, I'm quite excited to continue. With lockdown, our projects, that particular project is still undergoing. So it's going to have comfortable, safe seats for the two little ones to sit on. Okay, so you've got the driver's seat, passenger seat, and then behind that another set of seats. Obviously, getting
aftermarket seats.
Yeah, they'll be after. Well, we'll look and see what we can find. You know, we need, if we can put 2 good Toyota seats in there, we want to create space between those seats. One that you can utilize that space, and also storage underneath the seats. Because what you've got is you're now, by putting 2 seats, you're taking up quite a lot of valuable storage space. And now you've got a couple who want to travel and they're looking at taking their children, so the children need some space. So maybe each child could have their own space under the seat that they can put their own personal toys, whatever they need. And then also, when children are traveling, you need to be able to have some sort of entertainment for them. So what's quite nice is to build something that can, maybe a little table that can fold down, or something that allows them to be able to watch something, do something,
draw a little picture,
whatever. Yeah. So it's important to create their space and make
that is another
space.
Key consideration is your children when you're traveling.
Yeah, well, exactly. And when they're smaller children, you know, you've got that. So again, you know, they've got the pop-up roof on that vehicle. They're going to have the.
I see you've got 2 different pop-up roofs. One where it actually goes up on both sides.
So that's not available in South Africa.
That looks like
actually
a really good roof.
It was. Look, I think it served its purpose. It was built in New Zealand.
Yeah.
It's called a Kia conversion. It gives a lot of space in the vehicle. They're not made. I don't know if they even make them anymore. And the concept of that roof going straight up is great for giving space.
It's almost like a Westphalia.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the option of the other ones are designed with a wedge shape, where the roof actually pivots up like that, and that certainly gives us a lot more convenience to build the vehicles and enough space inside. But it makes it easy to pull the bed down inside. Someone can sleep up top. So with going back to this vehicle with two children and 2 adults. So the adults will sleep upstairs, the kids will sleep downstairs. So behind those seats, we're going to have storage designed that they can access.
What, parents on the roof and the kids on the floor?
Kids not on the floor. So basically behind the rear seats. So you've got front seat, passenger, front 2 seats, the second row of seats. Okay, and we're looking to see how we're going to build that into a bed area for the children. So it might be that the seats fold forward and we can create a bed area for the children. I haven't actually designed
and storage where you're going to put the storage.
Behind those seats we've got storage, and you're going to have to put, we've got fridge and a kitchen. Are we building it? So it's not going to be as much movable space inside the vehicle, but it's going to give a very safe spot for the parents with their children to be, because they're small children.
Exactly.
You know,
that's probably the best place for them to be.
Well, it is, because they're in the vehicle.
Yeah.
Mom and dad have got space,
Yeah.
so everyone can sleep comfortably.
Yeah.
And if you're in the car, you're safe, you're comfortable,
Yeah.
and
then they're still relatively close to their parents, so they're not going to get scared.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, it's going to be a good build. We'll feature it. It'll be interesting.
Perfect.